Chapter 356. For the strong, everyone was always in awe. They gradually restrained their slightly disgusted look because of Xiao Xian's ragged clothes. When the sun was close to the horizon, Xiao Xian finally saw the place where the Maka tribe was located. The stone wall separated the Maka tribe from the outside. Looking from a high place, one could see the stone houses inside. Although they were not high, they were still orderly. Some houses also specially surrounded the yard with stones. For Wanfu to bring back a stranger, the people of the Maka tribe did not intend to pay attention. But Xiao Xian's ragged clothes and the two beasts he was carrying were too contradictory. The people who saw this scene could not help but take a few more glances. Who was this person? Really strange. Xiao Xian already knew on the way here that many of the tribes here were no longer bound by totems. They also had things of faith, but most of them were spiritual sustenance, not the main source of power. If a stranger was accepted by a family, as long as he did not do anything that hindered the tribe, he could be accepted by the tribe and become a member of it. The closer he got to the Maka tribe, the deeper the doubts in Xiao Xian's heart. He did not feel the existence of the fire seed in the Maka tribe. Asking about the fire pit, Xiao Xian knew that in the Maka tribe, there was a fire pit. Perhaps it was a custom passed down by the ancestors, and it would be used during the sacrifice. However, unlike the tribes that Xiao Xian knew before, there was no fire seed in their fire pit. Not only the Maka tribe, Wanfu told Xiao Xian that other tribes were also like this. As for the fire seed, the ancestors would only mention it when they told stories to the younger generation. However, no one could say clearly how the fire seed disappeared. Many of them were glossed over because they were not clear. It was too long ago, and they had no way to know. Living with Wanfu were two old people and his elder brother's family. Wanfu's elder brother, Wanfa, did not go with them to collect dew. Instead, he went with another team to look for water in another direction, but he only brought back some dried fruits. It was not a fruitless return. Xiao Xian temporarily lived in the Maka tribe. He also told Wanfu that he was only staying temporarily and would leave in a few days. Wanfa didn't have a good temper like his younger brother. When he saw Xiao Xian, he glanced at Xiao Xian with a picky and defensive look, as if he was looking at someone with bad intentions. Even when Xiao Xian brought two wild beasts, his attitude did not change. Xiao Xian's rags had already caused Wanfa to despise him. Seeing that Xiao Xian was actually using a stone knife, Wanfa despised him even more. This person was actually using a stone knife. It was no wonder that he only had rags that he had been wearing for who knew how long. Stone knives were only used by his grandfather's 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 grandfather. In their tribe, those who were slightly capable had metal knives. In the eyes of Wanfa and the others, Xiao Xian was just a poor guy with great strength. Wanfa waved his slightly deformed and scratched short sword in front of Xiao Xian as if he was showing off. Not only the Wanfu brothers, but most of the people of the Maka tribe had metal weapons on hand, or they were composite weapons. Weapons made of wood and animal horns combined with metal. As for pure stone weapons, except for some old people, the young warriors did not use them. Of course, there were also people who thought they were smart. They saw that Xiao Xian's stone knife was extraordinary. Under the guise of, "Looking at you, I'll help you," they wanted to use their rusty knife to exchange for Xiao Xian's stone knife. Xiao Xian certainly did not exchange. He just calmly looked at the other party. Seeing that the other party was uncomfortable, he took the initiative to give up and leave. Even if Xiao Xian's eyes were calm, the people who faced Xiao Xian had a feeling of breathlessness. It was as if there was a big hand covering the top of their head, and it could come down at any time. Wanfu's attitude had always been very good. He took out a set of his old clothes, let Shuri change it a little, and gave it to Xiao Xian to wear. They did not have new cloth, and of course, there were no new clothes. Xiao Xian did not care about wearing old clothes, it was better than wearing rags. Xiao Xian's appetite was big. He hunted 2 beasts, one was given to Wanfu's family, and the other was eaten by himself. He only cared about it for 1 day. The next day, he went out to hunt again, and brought back one. Every day, he would go out to hunt, eat it himself, and give some to Wanfu's family. Because of Xiao Xian's frequent movements, some people who originally disliked Xiao Xian began to have careful thoughts. Especially the young girls of the Maka tribe, the frequency of walking to Wanfu's door increased a lot. Some people dressed up every day to deliberately block Xiao Xian, in order to say a few more words. If they found such a hunter, they would not have to worry about starvation for the rest of their lives. Seeing that Xiao Xian's popularity was rising, the young people of the Maka tribe provoked Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian adopted a strategy of ignoring most of the time, and if he could not avoid it, he would end it quickly. There were not many senior totem warriors in this tribe. Most of the young people were intermediate totem warriors like Wanfu. Xiao Xian was not interested in bullying these people. After understanding Xiao Xian's strength, the number of people who challenged him gradually decreased. Instead, there were several high-level members of the Maka tribe. For those who had the ability, they were certainly willing to retain them. Knowing that Xiao Xian was only staying temporarily, they repeatedly sent people to persuade Xiao Xian to stay, and also promised some benefits. Unfortunately, they could not make Xiao Xian change his mind. For this reason, they regretted for several days. Because of Xiao Xian's temporary residence, the living conditions of Wanfu's family were obviously improved by a grade. The elderly and children in the family also seemed to be more energetic, but the problem of water was still difficult to solve. Xiao Xian could not help them. The efficiency of the rain stones in his hands was not high in dry places. However, the water that Wanfu and the others collected last time can last for 10 days if they save a little. After 10 days, everything would be fine. Seeing that Xiao Xian was distributing meat every day, Wanfu, who originally wanted to repay the kindness, did not expect that the kindness was not much. Instead, he received a lot of benefits from the other party. There was not much that he could help Xiao Xian, and his heart was even more guilty. He could only pull out what he knew when Xiao Xian asked something, and ask others if he did not know. This helped Xiao Xian a lot. On this day, Xiao Xian had lived in the Maka tribe for 10 days. He had a preliminary understanding of this place and did not intend to continue to live here. Walking to the door of the house, Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. "Hey, Xiao Xian, you don't go out today." Wanfu, who had just woken up, saw that Xiao Xian did not go out, and asked in surprise. During this time, Xiao Xian went out in the morning every day and came back when the sun was tilting. Wanfu's people were already used to it. Even if they went out to hunt, they would not go out every day. Xiao Xian was a special case. Sure enough, a real warrior was different from others. Seeing Xiao Xian look up at the sky, Wanfu remembered what Xiao Xian said to them about rain 10 days ago. He went to the door and looked up at the sky. The sun was still high in the sky, and there were some floating clouds in the sky. But in this place, sometimes clouds did not mean that it would rain. Looking at the shape was useless. Sometimes, looking at the dark clouds and rolling thunder, it did not take long for the sky to clear again. It was not uncommon. "I'm leaving today. Thank you for your hospitality." Xiao Xian turned and said. "Ah. You're leaving?" Shirue, who came out, was also surprised. She knew the changes in the family during this time. Now there was still a lot of meat in the family that had not been eaten and was hung outside to dry. Many people envied their family for having such a person. Unfortunately, he was leaving. Also, such a person would not be trapped in a remote place like the Maka tribe. Even if he went to the city-state, or to those big tribes, he could easily stay. When Xiao Xian came, he did not bring many things, and when he left, he did not bring much. The most obvious thing was that he changed his clothes, and he did not look so embarrassed. When Xiao Xian left, he met a traveling team of Maka coming back from the outside. This team went to farther places to trade, and also helped the tribes bring back some things, such as metal weapons and new cloth. In the traveling team, there were 3 senior totem warriors, 2 middle-aged men, and 1 older. However, Xiao Xian was not afraid of them, not to mention that he was already leaving, so he did not look at this team. However, the people in the team saw Xiao Xian, a stranger, and glanced at him a few more times. Wanfu sent Xiao Xian out of the tribe, and then went back. Wanfu, who was that person just now? There were people in the traveling team who were familiar with Wanfu, and asked. Oh, his name is Xiao Xian. He saved me and Shurue, and lived in our house for 10 days. He is very powerful, and can go out to hunt beasts every day. Wanfu talked about Xiao Xian's matter. When he met a familiar friend, Wanfu's words were more. He described the situation when Xiao Xian saved them in detail, and also added some words to polish it, which could arouse the interest of the listeners. Wow, so powerful. Yes. Very powerful. Wanfu nodded vigorously. Every time he said this, many people did not believe it, saying that he was too exaggerated. However, he really did not exaggerate, and what he said was the truth. Some people in the returning team also heard Wanfu's words. Like others, they felt that Wanfu's words were only 30% true, at most 50%. The young people in the tribe always exaggerated things. However, the leaders of the team thought more about it. A hale and hearty old man looked at the person next to him and said, "Why do I feel that this method of directly moving a big stone to smash a behemoth sounds a bit familiar?" "Me too, I just can't remember where I heard it." The person next to the old man also said. "Such a fierce and arrogant method of fighting, I have indeed heard it. I should have heard it when I went to the city-state before." The 3 people with the highest status in the team said so, and the others did not have much to say. No matter what they thought, they would not refute the words of these 3 elders. After a moment of silence, the old man asked Wanfu, "I just saw him talk to you before he left. What was he talking about?" Wanfu looked serious. This was the father of the current leader of the tribe. His position in the tribe was very high, and he had to be treated with respect. Seeing this question, Wanfu did not hide it and seriously replied, 10 days ago, when we went out to collect, Xiao Xian said that it would rain this afternoon. Just now, he reminded me to wash the big jar full of jerky at home and wait for the water." As soon as Wanfu's voice fell, a few younger people could not help but laugh. "Ha! You believe this? Who does he think he is? Is he?" Here, some people like that were not collectively called witches, but different according to gender. Men were witches, women were witches, and the names were different. That's right. How did he fall into such a situation? Also, born outside, don't know where the tribe is? Full of lies. Extremely bad. Someone answered. He should be beaten up and thrown out. Only you, Wanfu, would believe it. How old are you? Still so easily deceived. The young people spoke one after another, but the 3 people with the highest status in the team did not make a sound. They seemed to be contemplating. After a long while, the old man smiled casually, "Probably I think too much. Okay, everyone hurry up and move the things back." Wanfu intended to defend Xiao Xian, but the leader's father had spoken, so he could only swallow the defense. But after returning, Wanfu and Shurue quickly cleaned up the pots and jars in the house. Noon gradually passed. The young people who returned to the tribe from the expedition team were bragging to their friends about what they had seen and heard on this trip, while the elders were in the house to summarize and discuss the expedition. Rumble. Thunder seemed to roll from a distance. Whether it was the young people who were bragging outside or the elders who were discussing in the house, they all stopped moving. The rest of the Maka tribe also stopped what they were doing and ran out to look at the sky. The scorching sun in the sky was quickly being blocked by the clouds. The wind was blowing fiercely, and the clouds were rapidly increasing and thickening at a speed visible to the naked eye, like an army passing through. Rumble, thunder sounded one after another. This time, it did not look like it was just thunder and not rain, but it was really raining. Hurry up! Clear out the jars in the house! Someone shouted. Oh, my house is filled with things. Now is the time to think about other things, quickly clear it out. What about the things in it? It's all poured out. Hurry up. The weather here was changing rapidly. No one knew how long the rain would last. If they missed it, they would definitely regret it. D-la. 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 The bean-sized raindrops hit the ground, splashing a lot of dust. The sky was no longer clear. It was gloomy, heavy, and scary. Soon, the raindrops became dense, like a torrential downpour, as if someone was pouring water from the sky. The children screamed and played outside with their bare bodies and bare feet. The young people who were just sitting at the door and bragging to their friends looked at the sky sluggishly, murmuring, "It's really raining." The elders who were discussing in the house, especially the old man, all had the same idea. That person actually hit the nail on the head. Could it be that that person was really a Hui? Especially the people who had persuaded Xiao Xian to stay, now they felt regret. If they had known earlier, they would have made the other party stay even if they had to hug his leg. Their Maka tribe also had Hui, but there were also high and low Hui. If the Hui of their tribe went to the city, they would not dare to say that they were Hui. Their ability was too low, and they would be laughed at by the witches of the city. And the person who could predict the rain 10 days ago was, of course, more powerful. If they could make him stay. At this time, Xiao Xian was already far away from the Maka tribe. The cactus around, because of the rain, the underground roots were desperately absorbing the water that finally fell. The deep groove-like folds on the stems also swelled a lot because of the absorption of water. They were like machines that stored water, storing the water and then preparing for the next dry day. Xiao Xian, who was walking among them, wiped the water on his face, looked at the lightning and thunder in the sky, smiled softly, and moved forward step by step. Chapter 357. After leaving the Maka tribe, Xiao Xian also saw people from other tribes going out, but he did not go with them. Those people were very wary of Xiao Xian, probably because they were carrying some goods and were worried that Xiao Xian would rob them. Xiao Xian also had the experience of a long journey. He knew that the team would reject strangers halfway, so he did not go up. He just asked at a distance of 20 meters. The other party saw that Xiao Xian did not mean to get close. After reluctantly answering Xiao Xian's 2 questions, they hurried away. Xiao Xian just asked about the geographical shape of the surrounding area, but the other party's answer was too brief. Xiao Xian could only combine the information he heard from the Maka tribe and speculate about where to go. Here, there were tribes and slave masters. However, there weren't many conflicts between the tribes and the slave masters, unlike the conflicts on the other side of the sea. Many of the tribes even often went to the cities under the jurisdiction of the slave owners to trade. For them, this was a very common thing. For example, the Maka tribe often had traveling teams go to the nearest city, exchanging things for cloth, copper weapons and so on. However, Xiao Xian did not intend to go to the slave owner's territory. What he wanted to know most now was whether the other half of the Yanjiao tribe was here or not. If the preferences of the Yanjiao people had not changed, they would probably be more inclined to the mountainous areas, especially places with many fierce beasts. With more people, there would naturally be fewer beasts and fierce beasts. Therefore, Xiao Xian intended to go to the mountainous areas with fewer people to try his luck. After asking about the surrounding geographical shape, Xiao Xian made another knot divination to determine a direction and went there. He only divined the approximate location, not the distance, so he could only go in that direction. In the beginning, he could see some people traveling every 2 days, but gradually, the number of people he saw decreased. The land became desolate, and although the surrounding mountains and forests were wide, he did not know if it was because of the soil, but the growth of plants was not lush, and there were not many thick trees. Xiao Xian looked up and saw that there were layers of slightly desolate mountains around him. He did not change his route, intending to pass through the valley. He listened carefully to the movements around him. Except for the cries of some birds and small beasts, he did not hear any other dangerous sounds. The cries of the birds and beasts were relatively peaceful, and there was no panic. It should be relatively safe here. There were occasional streams flowing through the valley. Xiao Xian had been following the predetermined route and direction. When he came to a stream, he saw someone lying by the water, with his head next to the stream. When the stream flowed, the other's face. His gray hair scattered in the water, swinging with the stream. If the other person had already died, Xiao Xian would not have cared. However, the person was still alive, just a little weak. After going over to check, Xiao Xian found that this was a rather old man. There were many wrinkles on his face, and he looked older than he looked from the back. The person did not have any serious external injuries. Other than the broken bone in his right arm, the rest of his body was fine. This person was dressed in gray cotton clothes, and it was unknown how much he had experienced. His clothes were tattered, and were only a little better than when Xiao Xian had first arrived. The weapons he carried were a few small copper knives. The knives looked different, but they were all very small. Judging from the shape, they did not look like they were used as hidden weapons. Xiao Xian did not know what they were used for. There was also a bag wrapped around his waist. The bag was made of animal skin. Judging from the leather, it was at the level of a dire beast. The skin of an ordinary beast would not be so tough. After carefully sizing up the person, Xiao Xian carefully turned him over and moved him away from the stream. Xiao Xian called out to him, but he did not wake up. Seeing that the person did not wake up, Xiao Xian's gaze fell on the animal skin bag around the person's waist. He reached out and poked it. When the other party was lying by the stream, his uninjured left arm had been protecting his body. Even when he flipped over, his arm did not leave his body. This was a subconscious action, which meant that the animal skin pouch was very important to this person. When Xiao Xian reached out and poked the animal skin bag, the person did not wake up, but the muscles on his face twitched. When he poked again, the person's eyes suddenly opened. His bloodshot eyes were filled with vigilance and murderous intent. He pushed his elbow against the ground and quickly rolled away from Xiao Xian. Then, he hit his head on a big rock beside him. Xiao Xian heard the sound and felt pain for him. There was no need to be so agitated. Fortunately, the person did not faint. After groaning in pain, the person wanted to reach out and touch his injured forehead. However, his right arm was injured, and his left arm was protecting the animal skin bag. He moved his left arm, but after some thought, he put it back and continued to protect the animal skin bag. He allowed the blood to flow from his forehead, but his eyes were fixed on Xiao Xian, as if he was afraid that Xiao Xian would come over and rob him. "Don't worry, I won't rob you." Xiao Xian saw him like this and said. At such an old age, he did not know why he had fainted by the stream. When he woke up, he hit his head on a rock. It would be strange if he felt good. The person relaxed a little, but his guard was still up. "If I wanted to rob you, I would have done it a long time ago. Why would I wait until now? Besides, even if I wanted to rob you now, can you stop me?" Xiao Xian said. "That's true." The white-haired old man lowered his guard a little. The murderous aura he had when he woke up also disappeared. His head was still a little dizzy, so he calmed down and moved his nose. He looked at Xiao Xian and asked, "Do you have any meat on you?" It was a question, but his tone was very certain. Xiao Xian reached into the bag and took out a piece of jerky. He threw it over and asked, "How did you faint here?" The old man hurriedly caught the jerky that Xiao Xian threw over and sniffed it. His eyes were a little disgusted, but his movements were not slow. He quickly took a few bites and answered Xiao Xian with a lisp, "I was hungry." He had thought that it was poison or some other reason, but the answer turned out to be hunger. After quickly finishing the jerky that Xiao Xian gave him, the old man looked at Xiao Xian again and asked, "Do you have any more?" Xiao Xian took out another piece, but did not immediately hand it over. Instead, he said, "Answer a few of my questions first, and I'll give you the jerky in my hand." The old man frowned and did not speak. It seemed that he was not very willing. Xiao Xian did not mind. He raised his finger and pointed, asking, "Walk that way. How long will it take to see the dense forest?" After hearing Xiao Xian's question, the old man's frown relaxed. He had thought that it was some other question, but it turned out to be this. "I don't know. I've never been there. It's my first time here. However, as far as I know, you won't see the dense forest for at least 2 days. It's all the same as here." The old man replied, "This is a famous wasteland. There isn't even a tribe here. Even if you walk for 2 more days, you won't see anyone else." After handing the jerky to the old man, Xiao Xian went to the stream to wash his face and continued on his way. The old man was energetic after eating the jerky and could walk. Xiao Xian did not need to be nosy anymore. However, Xiao Xian had only taken a few steps when the old man's voice came from behind him. "Hey, wait! Little brother." Just a moment ago, he had been on guard against Xiao Xian like he was guarding against a thief. Now he was calling him little brother so intimately. Usually, when someone called someone so intimately, there must be some other intention. Xiao Xian turned around and looked at the old man, asking him what was going on. The old man got up from the ground and looked around. His eyes stopped at one spot and he happily pointed in that direction, "There. It's that grass with white stripes. Pick some for me." From his tone, it was as if he was ordering people around. Xiao Xian looked at the place the old man was pointing at. It was almost vertical to the ground at a 90-degree angle. At least 30 meters above the ground, there were a few grasses that were half an arm's length with white stripes growing there. Xiao Xian wanted to turn around and leave, but seeing that the old man did not seem to realize that his tone was wrong, Xiao Xian thought for a moment and shook his head. Forget it, he would not argue with the old man. Besides, he also wanted to know what the grasses with white stripes were for. In such an unfamiliar place, it was always good to know more. Chapter 358. Although the mountain wall was almost perpendicular to the ground and was difficult for many people to climb, it was nothing for Xiao Xian. After all, he had climbed this kind of mountain wall many times when he was hunting in the tribe, so he was very familiar with it. The old man stood below and watched Xiao Xian nimbly climb up the mountain wall from below like a gecko sticking to the wall. He seemed to be at ease and didn't seem to be strenuous at all. Seeing this, the old man couldn't help but raise his white eyebrows. He stared at Xiao Xian's back with shining eyes. Xiao Xian, who was climbing up the mountain wall, sensed something. He stopped and looked back, just in time to meet the old man's gaze. The old man smiled unusually amiably. He waved at Xiao Xian and pointed at the grass on the mountain wall, saying, "Go on, go on." Xiao Xian suppressed the doubts in his heart and continued to climb up. He reached out to grab the grass, intending to pull it down directly. "Hey! Don't pull it, don't pull it. If you use it to dig it, the roots will stay longer. Use my knife to dig it. Catch!" The old man took out a strange-looking copper knife from his leather bag and threw it at Xiao Xian. So troublesome. Xiao Xian cursed in his heart. The throw was accurate. Xiao Xian caught the depression in the mountain wall with one hand and caught the knife with the other. He then used the knife to dig up the grass with white stripes. The knife looked strange, but it was very suitable for digging up grass that grew on the mountain wall. It didn't take long for him to dig up the grass, roots included. Catch! Xiao Xian threw the knife and the grass down. The old man hurried over, ignoring the falling knife and carefully catching the falling grass. What are you using this grass for? Xiao Xian asked as he came down from the mountain wall and saw the old man cut a leaf and put it in his mouth. Medicine. It's useful for bone injuries. The old man didn't say much. He just kept chewing the leaf, the muscles on his face twitching. When he was almost done, he swallowed it. After tasting it for a moment, he felt that it wasn't enough, so he cut off a smaller leaf and continued chewing. Thinking of the bone injury on the old man's arm, Xiao Xian memorized the appearance of the grass. When the old man chewed the grass, he seemed to be in pain. Xiao Xian asked, "How does it taste?" The old man didn't say much. He cut off a small leaf and handed it to Xiao Xian. Try it. You can eat it even when you're not injured. Yes. As long as you don't eat too much, you'll be fine. All right. Xiao Xian took the leaf. He didn't look at it carefully when he was digging earlier, but now he realized that the veins of the grass were harder than he had imagined. Especially the thickest veins with white stripes, they seemed to produce a crisp sound if he tried to break them. Xiao Xian bit the tip of the leaf first. Feeling the cool bitter taste, he didn't find anything wrong with his body, so he bit another half of the leaf and chewed. This time, he ate more of the veins, so the strong bitterness suppressed the cool taste. No wonder the old man's face twitched when he chewed. It was so bitter. The old man originally wanted to see Xiao Xian stomp his feet in pain, but he found that Xiao Xian just frowned and didn't have any other expression. Could it be that his sense of taste is bad? The old man thought. If so, this young man is really pitiful. He can't taste the world. Ignoring the old man's thoughts, Xiao Xian finished chewing the whole leaf. The bitter taste gradually disappeared, and the cool taste lingered. His exhaustion disappeared a lot. As for his bones, because there were no bone injuries, Xiao Xian didn't feel much. He only felt that some strength seemed to flow into his bones. Since the old man was fine, Xiao Xian planned to leave. This time, as soon as Xiao Xian moved, the old man hurriedly stopped him. Hey, wait. You want to go that way? I'll go with you. The old man stood up and carefully put the white striped grass into a cloth bag. Xiao Xian turned to look at the old man. He didn't say anything, waiting for the old man to continue. I came here to look for something. Although I don't know much about this area, I know more things than you. Don't be fooled by the fact that this place is very desolate. There are many poisonous things here. If something happens to you, I can help you. The old man said. What else? Xiao Xian asked. It's not easy for me to move. If I find something, you can help. The old man thought that this was a very good idea. Okay, that's it. However, Xiao Xian ignored him and continued to follow the route of the plan. The old man hurriedly followed and continued to persuade Xiao Xian. When the old man's saliva was almost dry, Xiao Xian asked, What are you looking for here? Looking for? The old man paused. He seemed to have some concerns and didn't want to say it. Forget it if you don't want to say it. Seeing Xiao Xian quicken his pace, the old man took a few steps forward and sighed. Have you ever heard of 1,000 gold grains? 1,000 gold grains. The word gold in the name definitely didn't refer to gold or metal. Since the old man was here, he should be looking for a plant. Since the word gold was in the name, it either referred to the color or to highlight its value. Thinking about it, Xiao Xian shook his head and said, Never heard of it. The old man looked at Xiao Xian with an ignorant expression and said, I came here to look for 1,000 gold grains. It is said that 1,000 gold grains can produce 1,000 grains per plant. It is also drought-resistant and can grow in barren land with very little rain. Food crops. So you came here to try your luck? Xiao Xian asked. This place was indeed barren. Although there were streams and springs in the mountains, there was not much rain in this place and it was dry. Yes, we grow food there. In the past 2 years, there has been less rain. It is said that the drought will continue for a few years. Speaking of this, the old man was very emotional. But it was useless to complain, so he came to look for these drought-resistant food crops. Aren't there witches and sorcerers? Can't they pray for rain? Xiao Xian asked again. He didn't know if the tribes here could pray for rain, so he asked this question just to test the waters. In this place, in addition to some tribal sorcerers, there were some independent professional sorcerers. Many people would pay these sorcerers to solve some problems that others couldn't solve. When the old man heard this, his face showed anger. Don't mention it, a bunch of trash. Descendants of the ancient sorcerers, you can't even pray for rain. Bah! Xiao Xian was speechless. People who dared to bah the sorcerers, Xiao Xian had only seen one so far, and he was almost starved to death. The people of the Maka tribe absolutely did not dare to bah the sorcerers. Most of the people he had seen until now held a kind of awe for the sorcerers. Except for the one next to him. If they couldn't solve the problem of rain, they could only work on crops. No matter what the old man's temper was, traveling thousands of miles to find a solution was admirable. That 1,000 gold grain, what does it look like? Xiao Xian asked. It's 1,000 gold grains. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. How can you find it if you haven't seen it? I'll be able to recognize it when I see it. The old man didn't think there was a problem at all. Right, what's your name? The old man asked. Xiao Xian, what about you? My name is Gui. The old man also wrote the words on the ground with a branch. The old man didn't ask which tribe Xiao Xian was from. He was not interested in which tribe Xiao Xian came from. Xiao Xian was about to ask again. He wanted to inquire about some things about the Yanjiao tribe from the old man, but he heard the old man suddenly say, that, Xiao Xian something, take that off for me. No, I'm not your slave. Xiao Xian didn't look back. Seeing that Xiao Xian was going away, the old man realized the problem with his tone. He quickly slowed down and stepped forward to pull Xiao Xian. Do me a favor, take that off for me. Chapter 359. Xiao Xian didn't expect the old man to change his commanding tone. He was probably used to ordering people around and couldn't change it in a short time. It was already rare for him to say the word, help. Seeing the old man so agitated, Xiao Xian looked in the direction he was pointing. It was another stalk of grass growing on the mountain wall. However, this stalk of grass looked very ordinary, without any patterns. Compared to the grass around Xiao Xian's feet, its leaves were slightly narrower and longer. What kind of grass is that? What's it used for? Xiao Xian asked. I don't know. Xiao Xian. Why are you so agitated if you don't know? I'm agitated because I don't know. I've never seen that kind of grass before. The old man stared straight at the mountain wall and urged Xiao Xian, hurry up. Xiao Xian shook his head and didn't want to lower himself to the old man's level. However, it was only a matter of time for Xiao Xian to go up the mountain wall and pick the grass. It wasn't difficult, so Xiao Xian didn't think too much about it. Just like before, Xiao Xian used the old man's knife to dig up the grass and threw it to the old man. Other than some herbs that were often used in the tribe and some recorded plants, Xiao Xian didn't recognize many other plants. After coming here, there were even more plants that he didn't recognize. Xiao Xian didn't know what was so special about this stalk of grass and wanted to see how the old man would treat it. After carefully observing and smelling it, the old man cut off a leaf and bit the tip, tasting it carefully. Is there any smell? Xiao Xian asked. The old man shook his head, no smell. It's strange, there's not even the smell of grass. What do you think? Xiao Xian asked again. What do I think? I have a bad feeling. The old man commented. If you don't feel good, why are you still eating? Xiao Xian watched the old man eat a whole leaf. Then, the old man's face began to twitch. It wasn't the kind of twitching from the bitter taste, but from an uncontrollable twitch. His face turned a strange greenish-gray. It was poisonous. Spit it out. Xiao Xian hurriedly said. He looked around, broke off a branch, and peeled off the outer skin, intending to help the old man vomit. The old man, whose face was quickly turning green, saw that Xiao Xian was about to touch his throat with the branch. He knew what Xiao Xian was going to do, so he turned his head to avoid the branch. He even reached out his arm to push Xiao Xian. Ni Yuan Kai. Xiao Xian was stunned for a moment before he realized that the old man was telling him to leave because he was in the way. Fine, I'll leave then. Xiao Xian thought to himself, I'm not the one who got poisoned. Why should I be anxious? Xiao Xian thought that the old man would vomit himself or take out some hidden herbs to detoxify the poison. However, the old man's behavior surprised Xiao Xian. The old man's face was ashen, and the wrinkles on his face had deepened due to the pain. His entire face was scrunched up, and it was obvious that he was in great pain. After staggering 2 steps, the old man sat down against the mountain wall. Hey, old Jew, are you really okay? Don't you want to eat something to detoxify the poison? Xiao Xian advised. The old man didn't speak. He just waved his hand weakly and sat there motionless. He didn't speak, and his eyes were closed. If it weren't for the slight rise and fall of his chest, at first glance, one would think that he had already stopped breathing. His breath was weakening. Xiao Xian stared at the old man. Is this old man looking for death? Eating something he hasn't seen before, and not vomiting after eating it. He's just holding back the poison. Isn't he looking for death? Is he tired of living? Suddenly, Xiao Xian noticed that some black veins had appeared on the old man's body. They looked like extended leaves. On his face, arms, and the parts of his body that were exposed outside his clothes, there were these black veins. Totem tattoos. A ball of fire appeared in Xiao Xian's mind. This ball of fire was the source of the old man's strength. However, the difference was that there was a vague shadow in this ball of fire. It looked like a stalk of grass or something else. It couldn't be seen clearly because it was surrounded by the fire. The blue and red flames intertwined. Not only did it not weaken, but it seemed to be burning more and more fiercely. The flames surged and expanded. Within the ball of fire, there was a faint shadow, like a weak seedling, growing and growing. Looking at the veins on the old man's body, the original black veins gradually turned into a bright green. The old man's face also began to recede. The aura of death was expelled, and in its place was an extremely strong aura of life. When the old man's face completely disappeared, the green veins also faded away. Everything returned to normal. Just by looking at the old man's current appearance, no one would have thought that the old man had just eaten a piece of poisonous grass and almost died. If Xiao Xian hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have thought of it. No wonder he was so fearless. Just now, he had pushed him away with such force. It turned out that he had the ability to save his life. Xiao Xian calmed down. The old man let out a long breath and opened his eyes. He carefully looked at the seemingly inconspicuous grass in his hand that he hadn't put down. His eyes lit up. Seeing the old man carefully put away the grass, Xiao Xian asked, "Are you really okay?" "I'm fine. It's just a little poison." The old man didn't care. His casual tone showed that he really didn't care about the seemingly dangerous situation just now. Only this old man would be like this. If it were anyone else, they would have already died from the poison. Since I entered the mountain until now, I have already tasted more than 100 types of grass. There are also poisonous ones, but this one isn't the most poisonous. The old man said casually. Xiao Xian caught a glimpse of pride in the old man's eyes. He wanted to praise him, but he directly swallowed it back. He thought that Xiao Xian would be amazed. Who knew that after waiting for a while, when he looked up, the old man saw that Xiao Xian had already left. He didn't care about anything else and hurriedly chased after Xiao Xian. He was still counting on Xiao Xian to help him pick the grass. Before he met Xiao Xian, he also saw a lot of unfamiliar grass, but he couldn't pick it. He even broke an arm, so he could only give up. Now it was different. Having someone to help him pick the grass really saved him a lot of trouble. Because of the old man, Xiao Xian didn't take the shortest route. Sometimes, he would climb the mountain to find some plants. The general direction didn't change, but the distance was longer. Xiao Xian followed the old man and collected some poisons and medicines. He also learned about a lot of plants. It was rare to meet someone who would listen to him. When the old man was in the mood, he would tell him about the distribution of various herbs. He had been to many places, so he knew a lot. From the old man's words, Xiao Xian not only learned about various medicinal plants, but also the distribution of some tribes and cities. Overall, this trip was worth it. The old man told Xiao Xian that he could judge what was in a direction based on some flying insects, what kind of changes were happening to the plants there. Different insects had different preferences. If he was looking for something, this could save a lot of time. Of course, in addition to these flying insects, you can also judge by some other beasts, such as. The old man was about to point to a small bird and was about to say something when his ears quickly shook twice. The old man's eyes flashed. He didn't care about the bird anymore and looked in a direction. At the same time, he raised his hand to signal Xiao Xian not to make a sound. Xiao Xian looked in that direction. There was a cluster of low grass, which was the densest grass in the area. And behind the grass, there was an animal with grayish-white fur that looked very much like a mouse hiding behind it. After carefully listening to the movements around it, it stuck its head out, propped up its front body, sniffed the air, and then jumped out with a whoosh. Quick, follow it. The old man suppressed his excitement and whispered to Xiao Xian. Chapter 360. A wild mountain rat could make the old man so excited. It probably had something to do with the 1,000 gold grains that the old man had mentioned. Xiao Xian didn't wait any longer and quickly followed the wild rat. The wild rat ran very fast, but it would stop and look around vigilantly when it stopped. If it didn't find any threat, it would continue to run. Xiao Xian could only use some short trees or tall grass as cover. The plants in this area didn't grow well, so there weren't many things that could be used as cover. It was a little difficult to follow them quietly. For Xiao Xian, even if it was difficult, he could overcome it and successfully follow the wild rat. But the old man couldn't. His hiding skills weren't as good as Xiao Xian's, so he could only follow from a distance. Fortunately, he didn't have to keep an eye on the wild rat. He just had to follow Xiao Xian. After about 20 minutes, the wild rat finally stopped. Xiao Xian stood not far away and watched the wild rat enjoy its food. He turned around and waved to the old man who was following behind him. Even if Xiao Xian didn't recognize the plant, he was sure that it wasn't the 1,000 gold grains that the old man had mentioned. It was just a 1-meter tall shrub with some red fruits the size of a pinky nail. The wild rat's target was those red fruits. Looking at the wild rat eating the fruit until its eyes narrowed, the old man sighed, "What a pity." However, the old man didn't have much hope. He knew that the 1,000 gold grains weren't easy to find, so he was mentally prepared. After the wild rat enjoyed its food, it slowly ran in another direction. It was still running, but not as fast as before. Some birds smaller than sparrows flew over in the sky and pecked at the fruits. Before the birds finished pecking, the old man quickly grabbed a handful of the fruits and threw them into his mouth one by one. There was a raised stone on the ground next to him. The old man sat there and ate the fruit while looking around the mountain. "Do you know this tree?" Xiao Xian asked. "No, it's my first time eating it," the old man said. Xiao Xian pursed his lips and reached out to pluck a few fruits from the low shrub and tossed them into his mouth. It was a little sweet, and the taste was not bad. No wonder the wild rat rushed here. When hunting in the forest, if they saw an unknown plant, even if the fruit looked tempting, the hunting warriors would not touch it unless they saw other animals eating it. Only then would they try it bit by bit, and then confirm whether it could be included in the menu. However, this old man obviously relied on his detoxification physique to eat recklessly. Xiao Xian believed that even if he hadn't seen the scene of the wild rat and the bird, the old man would still eat it. "Old Jew, why do you want to try all kinds of trees and flowers? Using your own body to test the poison?" "That's right. Whether it's poison or medicine with great benefits, we have to try it before we know. There are still many things waiting to be discovered in the future. Our clan has been experimenting countless times since our ancestors. The things that we eat and use are all obtained through taste and body testing. Daggers, baskets, beds, mattresses, pillows, tea, wine, vinegar, sugar, oil, which one of them was not experimented with by our ancestors?" As he spoke, the old man's eyes showed incomparable reverence. He even stopped eating the fruit, and with infinite emotion, he said, "Our descendants will inherit the will of our ancestors, and shine through the ages. Our achievements will last forever." Xiao Xian watched the old man's spittle flying, impassioned. This old man really wanted to carry forward his ancestors' entrepreneurial spirit, pioneering spirit, and self-preservation spirit. The old man's biggest goal now was to find the 1,000-grain gold that was once mentioned in the ancestors' notes before he died. "Even if it's just a meeting, I'll be satisfied," the old man said. Since he saw the 1,000-grain gold mentioned in the ancestors' notes, the old man couldn't sleep or eat well, especially now that many places were dry and the harvest of grain crops was poor. Nowadays, not everyone was willing to go hunting. Many people with low abilities and those who advocated comfort were used to digging for food from the ground. Not many people were willing to go to the distant mountains and forests to fight with ferocious beasts. Moreover, there were not many beasts around the places where many people gathered. If they wanted to hunt, they would have to go to further places. Moreover, the dense mountains and forests had been occupied by some fierce tribes. Those people were not easy to talk to. If there was a disagreement, they would start a fight, especially those with horns. If they could find more drought-resistant grain crops, the current situation could be alleviated to a certain extent. As for the rain mentioned by Xiao Xian, there were people praying every year, but unfortunately, they couldn't get it. Thinking of this, the old man was angry. Those people claimed to be the descendants of the ancient witch tribe. They collected the salary quickly, but when it came to praying for rain, they found excuses. What a bunch of useless people. After the break, the two continued to walk along the main route, only occasionally going up the mountain. 2 days later, there was still no sign of the 1,000-grain gold. In these 2 days, the old man was poisoned 4 times because he encountered strange plants. One of them even bled from the 7 orifices. It was very scary. Xiao Xian thought that the old man couldn't survive, but after a long time, the old man continued to look for the 1,000-grain gold. In this regard, Xiao Xian had to sigh at the strength of the old man's detoxification system. Most of the time, Xiao Xian listened to the old man talk, occasionally saying a few words, but most of the time he was just a listener. From the old man's words, Xiao Xian could speculate some things. For example, the old man was not from a tribe, but from a city under the jurisdiction of a slave owner. The old man himself was a slave owner. Xiao Xian was the first to see such a slave owner. His previous impression of slave owners was the group of people on the other side of the desert. Now it was rare to meet a slave owner who was different. "No, I'm going to rest for a while. You look around." The old man leaned on a branch and sat down against the mountain wall. "I'm old, I can't compare to the past. Back then, don't think about the past. Go to sleep, sleep, and hurry up," Xiao Xian said. Because he was with the old man, Xiao Xian slowed down a lot. He wasn't taking the shortest route either. After walking for 2 days, he didn't feel like there were any trees around him. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to see a dense forest after 2 more days at this speed. Since he agreed to go with the old man, Xiao Xian wouldn't leave him halfway. He was not particularly in a hurry. In this barren place, Xiao Xian hadn't seen a large beast, but he did see a few human skeletons. Glancing around, Xiao Xian recalled the useful plants that the old man had introduced to him today. If he saw them in his field of vision, Xiao Xian would silently review them in his heart. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian heard running sounds. The sound wasn't loud, but listening to the sound and rhythm, it was very similar to the wild rats he had followed before. If it was just one, it wouldn't be a big deal, but Xiao Xian heard several. Could it be that this was a wild rat nest? Xiao Xian stood up and looked in the direction of the sound. Several wild rats came from different directions, running in the same direction. They didn't look like they were running for their lives, but more like the previous wild rat looking for fruit, with eagerness and desire. "Old Jew. Hey, wake up, there's a situation with old Jew." Xiao Xian pushed the sleeping old man. "What's wrong?" Because Xiao Xian was watching over him, the old man rarely fell asleep without worry. Before he could sleep enough, he was woken up by Xiao Xian, and for a moment he was a little confused. Xiao Xian was about to tell the old man about his discovery, but before he could open his mouth, the old man's ears twitched as he heard the movements around him. This was completely a professional conditioned reflex. When he heard other sounds, he directly ignored them. Only certain sounds could stimulate his nerves in the shortest amount of time. With a shiver, the old man was so excited that he didn't feel sleepy anymore. Looking around, the old man threw away the wooden stick he was using as a crutch and climbed up the mountain wall. The view here wasn't good, so he had to go to a higher place to look. But there weren't any thick trees around, and looking at the surrounding terrain, the most time-saving way was to climb the mountain wall. "Hey, slow down a bit." Xiao Xian was afraid that the old man would slip and fall, so he was on guard below. If the old man got excited and fell down, he could still catch him. However, the old man was too agitated to care so much. He only wanted to climb up the ladder. Xiao Xian saw that the old man was having a hard time climbing, so he helped him. After climbing up, the old man's radar-like eyes scanned the surroundings, his ears twitching as he scanned. He was probably trying to distinguish the sounds he wanted from the surrounding noise. Chapter 361. After looking at the wall, the old man's hands and feet were trembling when he came down. He was not afraid, but excited. He felt that climbing down was too slow, so the old man let Xiao Xian catch him from below. Without waiting for Xiao Xian to say anything, the old man had already let go of his hand and jumped down. "I." Xiao Xian wanted to curse, but he did not have time to do so. He quickly caught the old man who jumped down. "This time it's definitely it." After the old man came down, he hurriedly walked in one direction. That was the direction the wild rats were running towards. Even if it's not the 1,000-grain gold, it must be something special to make these wild rats behave like this. The old man walked as if he was flying. After a good night's sleep, he was much more energetic. This time, he used all his strength to keep up. Xiao Xian was also curious about what had made these wild rats so crazy. As he ran forward, some wild rats jumped out from other places. When they saw Xiao Xian, the wild rats only paused for a short while before continuing to run. It seemed that compared to Xiao Xian, the strange creature on the other side was more attractive to them. Therefore, they did not pay much attention to Xiao Xian's existence and only focused on running. There weren't so many wild rats running around before. Why are there suddenly so many of them? Xiao Xian asked. It must be that thing that's about to be cooked. The old man did not say much. He just sped up again. After waiting for so long and searching for so many years, he once again saw hope. Although he had encountered similar situations before, where he did not find the 1,000-grain gold but other precious herbs, this time, he had a strong premonition. Back then, his ancestors' notes also mentioned that when he found the 1,000-grain gold, he saw the activity of the surrounding rats. However, there was too little information recorded in the notes, and the old man could not get much information from it. He could only search again and again. This time, it must be. It must be. The old man roared in his heart. From the time Xiao Xian had known the old man until now, although it had only been a few days, it was the first time he saw the old man running so fast. His eyes were filled with fanaticism. At this time, if anyone came to block the way, the old man would probably fight them to the death. The further he ran, the more wild rats he encountered. It seemed that the wild rats living nearby, whether hiding in caves or underground, nearby or far away, all ran out and rushed to the same place as if they were going to a market. They even had a kind of courage to move forward. The commotion in the surroundings also attracted some other animals, but their target was only these wild rats. An animal that looked like a weasel intercepted several wild rats, and then swaggered away with its prey in its mouth. There was also a stupid-looking weasel standing there, as if it was going to intercept them. However, the wild rats had an urgent momentum. They did not slow down at all, nor did they change their direction. They rushed over, jumped up, stepped on the weasel, and jumped over. The other beasts did the same. Normally, these wild rats would definitely not have the courage to do so. They would definitely avoid the threat. Even if they saw their own kind being taken away, they would not give them a second look, and would not stay for a second longer. However, as they got closer and closer to their target, the group of rats grew stronger and the number of robbing animals decreased a lot. Probably after seeing such a situation, they did not dare to hunt alone. If they failed, they would be bitten instead. Xiao Xian and the old man followed these wild rats until they came to a place near the top of a mountain, where they were forced to stop. Why were they forced to stop? Because they could only go this far. Any further and they would be occupied by wild rats. At the same time, wild rats rushed over from afar to join such a huge team. Although this scale was not comparable to the insect swarm led by Sapphire in the desert, this was a barren mountain after all. There were not many animals to be seen on a normal day, so it was shocking to see thousands of wild rats all of a sudden. The wild rats that stopped also wanted to squeeze forward, but there were only rats in front of them. There was no open space at all. The ones at the front were especially big. When they were annoyed by the squeezing, they turned around and bit a few to death to intimidate them. When they saw that the ones at the back had stopped squeezing forward, they turned back with satisfaction and continued to stare at the top of the mountain, at the few plants swaying in the wind. Since they could not squeeze forward, the wild rats at the back stood up and stretched their necks to look obliquely at the top. They were originally a lump on the ground, but when they stood up and stretched, they looked like poles. Xiao Xian also saw the plants growing at the top of the mountain. The upright stalks were very thick, about the height of a person, and the leaves were long and narrow. Several dark golden grains drooped from each plant, giving people a heavy feeling. Gusts of wind blew, and the grains swayed. The old man who stopped panted heavily, his nostrils expanding and contracting. His gaze was fixed on the highest place on the top of the mountain, not moving at all, as if that was the only thing left in the whole world. The fanaticism and excitement in the old man's eyes were rising. His fists hanging by his side were clenched, and he couldn't wait to rush over and dig up those plants and take them away. "That's the 1,000 gold grain?" Xiao Xian asked in a low voice. "Yes. It must be." The old man's throat emitted a suppressed excitement. His whole person seemed to ignore everything around him, immersed in his own world, and became crazy. "Ha! Ha 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 ha! Found it! I finally found it!" Xiao Xian's eyelids twitched a few times, and a bad feeling suddenly rose. Sure enough, the moment the old man laughed loudly, the grayish-white wild rats in front of him turned around and looked at him. Their small eyes emitted a fierce light, especially those closest to the top of the mountain, whose bodies were obviously at least 2 or 3 times larger than the other wild rats. Their eyes were even glowing red, revealing a murderous intent. The few large wild rats at the top of the mountain looked at the swaying dark golden grains, and then turned to look at the old man who was also staring at the grains with burning eyes. They suddenly became angry, stood up, and opened their mouths to make a series of sharp squeaking sounds. Xiao Xian thought to himself, "Oh no." He lifted the old man's clothes, and the totemic power in his body suddenly surged. The magma-like totemic patterns appeared, accompanied by the vibration of the air around him, and shook away the wild rats that jumped over with their mouths open. He exerted strength in his legs and ran down the mountain. Probably because they were concerned about the grains at the top of the mountain, the wild rats didn't dare to chase him down. They were afraid that if they ran away, they wouldn't be able to come back in time to snatch the feast. On the other side, Xiao Xian ran to the mountainside while carrying the old man. Seeing that the wild rats didn't chase after him, he stopped and put the old man down. The old man didn't look at the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's body. At this time, there was nothing in his eyes except for the few plants at the top of the mountain. His heart was occupied by the dark golden grains. As soon as he was put down, the old man wanted to continue running up the mountain, but Xiao Xian forcibly held him down. "Let go, I want to go there." "Those are 1,000 grain gold, do you know 1,000 grain gold?" The old man struggled and shouted. "I don't care if it's 1,000 grain gold or 1,000 grain shit. I only know that it's been taken over by the wild rats." "Do you want to feed the wild rats?" Xiao Xian shouted. When the old man heard this, he gradually came back to his senses. He repeated Xiao Xian's words, "taken over by the wild rats." Thinking of the wild rats at the top of the mountain, the old man suddenly became unhappy. No, 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 those wild rats can't spoil them. Fortunately, he was still rational. The old man walked in circles, thinking of the best way. "Those grains are not fully ripe yet. The wild rats are probably waiting for the final moment of ripening. We just need to hurry and get rid of those wild rats before the grains ripen." The old man said. "How do we get rid of them?" Xiao Xian asked. It wasn't that he didn't have a way. If he forced himself to fight with the group of wild rats, he could do it, but he would have to pay a price. After all, there were too many wild rats, and the few that were closest to the top of the mountain were harder to deal with than the others. If they fought, there was no guarantee that the plants at the top of the mountain would be intact. The old man also considered all kinds of situations. After thinking for a while, his tightly knitted brows relaxed. He called Xiao Xian, "Follow me." Chapter 362. Xiao Xian followed the old man around the mountain. If he saw a plant he needed, the old man would go up and pick it. A short brown bush was cut off by the old man, and a spiral-shaped tree was peeled off. There were also some flowers that Xiao Xian had never seen before. The old man also picked the flowers. "You are going to?" Xiao Xian saw the old man's actions and asked. "Put down that group of wild rats." The old man's tone was stern. For the suspected 1,000 grain gold plants, he was determined to get them. He would never let those wild rats eat the grain. Poison them? Xiao Xian asked. There were also a lot of wild rats. If he wanted to poison those wild rats, even if he used herbs, the amount would be very large, unless he used a special medicine. However, the old man did not want to directly poison this group of wild rats. They are useful in this barren mountain. If there are more 1,000 grain gold in the future, we may need to rely on them to find it. I can't poison them all. I just want to poison them. The old man's hands were already full. Although there was not much grass growing in every part of the mountain, and there was even less grass to pick, the old man was in a hurry. He was also familiar with the places where some plants might grow. In just a short while, his hands were already full. I'll take it. You continue. Xiao Xian took the grass from the old man's hands. The old man did not insist. When he handed the grass to Xiao Xian, he warned, "Be careful, don't touch the cut. It won't be good if the grass juice gets on it. Also, don't get close to smell it. If you pour it in advance, I won't be able to put down all those wild rats." The two quickened their pace. The movement of the wild rats indicated that the grain on the top of the mountain would soon be fully ripe. They had to hurry. Following the old man, Xiao Xian also learned a lot, but not to the extent of the old man's ability to use materials at any time. Because they were in a hurry, the old man would not say much. Xiao Xian could only watch and remember, maybe it would be useful in the future. The mountain seemed to be full of short trees and weeds, but for people like the old man, it was actually full of treasures. Whether it was a waste or a treasure, it depended on the person. Some plants alone might not have much ability, but when combined together, it was different. What the old man wanted to concoct was a medicine that was a mixture of many kinds of plants. Okay, that's it. The old man began to take out things to prepare for the production. A small copper cauldron and a few oddly shaped knives were all that was needed to deal with all of this. Xiao Xian, go to the foot of the mountain and look for more one-line sorrow. Look for those that have a small opening. Don't take those that haven't opened, and don't take those that have opened completely. Old Ju did not lift his head as he spoke to Xiao Xian. His hands were busy, and he simply had no time to leave, nor could he match Xiao Xian's speed. Okay. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He knew what kind of plant the old man was talking about. On the way, the old man had taught him how to recognize it. Xiao Xian remembered that the aligned plants mostly grew in the valley between two mountains. He had seen a lot of them when he walked along the narrow part of the valley. The thaline shrub was not tall enough to reach Xiao Xian's waist. This was the old man's own name for the shrub. Running down the mountain, Xiao Xian looked around and saw a line. The so-called a line was because when the fruit of this shrub was about to mature, a line would appear on the fruit with a hard shell. Then as the fruit became more and more mature, the line would crack. The wind and sun would dry up the inside of the fruit, leaving only a small core. When the time was right, the cracked fruit would completely open and the core inside would be ejected. Xiao Xian tried it once and was hit by the core ejected from the fruit. It was quite painful. If it weren't for Xiao Xian's thick skin, perhaps his skin would have been broken. Generally, after the fruit of this plant cracked, there would be no other beasts around. In the old man's words, seeing the line on the fruit makes you worried. You can't get close. You'll get hurt if you get close. If it was not plucked properly, it would also stimulate the split fruit to shoot out the core in advance. That was why the old man had demonstrated twice to Xiao Xian, telling him how to pluck the one-line worry correctly. Compared to the previous 2 days, there were more and more fruits with lines and cracks on the tree, but he didn't know which ones were needed by the old man. Some of the cracks were still shallow and may not meet the old man's requirements. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian directly cut off the branches that were more densely packed with fruit. After finding more than 10 trees in a row and cutting off a lot of branches with fruit, Xiao Xian went up the mountain. The old man said that the wild rats on the mountain were waiting for the moment when the year was really ripe. When the ear reached the most perfect moment, the wild rats could get what they wanted from it. Maybe the bigger rats at the front of the group of wild rats had eaten a lot of 1,000-grain gold and grew up like that. Or after getting it, he could also cook some for himself. While thinking, Xiao Xian went up the mountain with the cut branches. When Xiao Xian arrived, the old man had already lit the fire. The various kinds of grass next to it were almost ready. There was a pungent smell coming out of the copper cauldron. "You stay away." The old man waved at Xiao Xian and let Xiao Xian put down the things and move away. After all, Xiao Xian didn't have a detoxification physique like the old man. He was afraid that Xiao Xian would collapse if he smelled too much of the smell. When Xiao Xian smelled the smell, he felt a little dizzy, so he moved his feet and stood about 10 meters away from the small cauldron. The fire was very strong, and steam kept coming out of the copper cauldron. The old man squatted next to it and stared, his eyes never leaving the small cauldron. He kept stirring it with his knife. "It's done." The old man shouted excitedly and put out the fire. He picked up the branch that Xiao Xian brought and quickly picked up the fruit that met his requirements. Then, he held the fruit in one hand and picked up 2 strange knives with the other hand. He scraped some powder from the small cauldron and poured the powder into the fruit through the gap between the fruit's opening. Each fruit was about the size of a quail egg, and the gap on the fruit was even narrower. However, the old man only held the knife with one hand and used the 2 strange knives to pour the powder in. The powder that leaked out was almost negligible. No wonder he brought so many strange knives. It turned out that he used them for this. After pouring the powder in, the old man covered the gaps with a thin, almost transparent layer of leaf skin. This way, the fine powder wouldn't leak out. He quickly poured the powder into all the fruits he picked and sealed the leaf skin. The old man picked up the last fruit with the least amount of powder and looked around. Not far away, a small bird was pecking at insects on the ground. Aiming at the target, the old man flicked his finger, and the fruit flew straight in that direction. It hit the ground and made a caw sound. The fruit was completely opened, and the core was shot out. At the same time, the powder inside was also sprayed out. Xiao Xian saw the bird flap its wings twice. It looked like it wanted to fly, but after shaking its wings twice, it fell down. "What do you think?" The old man looked at Xiao Xian with a proud face. Obviously, he was very satisfied with what he had made. Xiao Xian looked at the motionless bird on the ground and then at the completely opened and empty fruit shell. He sincerely commented, "It really is a divine artifact." Chapter 363. On the dry and cracked land, the closer to the top of the mountain, the more cracks there were on the ground. There were fewer plants growing around, and in many places, only exposed stones and dry hard soil could be seen. The wind at the top of the mountain gradually weakened, and the sun was scorching. Many wild rats waiting here had begun to feel thirsty, but they did not leave. Their claws only squeezed forward, not backward. Their eyes were fixed on the changing color of the grain on the top of the mountain, and their necks were itching to be thinner and longer, so that they could better see what was on the top of the mountain. The previous dark golden color gradually became lighter, and the dark surface became glossy. From afar, it looked like it was shining with golden light. Squeak! It was unknown which wild rat made a sound. This was like a signal for action, and the wild rats who were holding back their strength instantly moved, rushing forward. The first few big wild rats were about to jump up and bite the grain when they suddenly heard a whooshing sound in their ears. Something shot from behind. Then, there was a cracking sound, and an unpleasant smell rose around them. The wild rats who smelled these odors began to fall into a trance, and they could not walk steadily. This was just the beginning. Finally, the dense cracking sound rang out one after another, smashing into the crowd of rats. Xiao Xian held his breath, and while smashing the artifact, he quickly rushed to the top of the mountain, and then stood there, smashing while dealing with the rushing rats. The old man Ju's medicine had already overturned a large number of wild rats. Although it could not solve all the wild rats, it greatly reduced the pressure on Xiao Xian, and it was easy to deal with the rest. After all, they were just wild rats, not ferocious beasts. Xiao Xian smashed the artifact with one hand, and in the other hand, he held a broom-like thing tied with branches. When he saw the wild rats rushing over, he vigorously swept them. In fact, Xiao Xian was more willing to use a fierce weapon, but the old man Ju personally made this broom, saying that it was useful to deal with wild rats, so Xiao Xian used it. Sure enough, after being swept by the broom, the wild rats seemed to be contaminated with something they didn't like. They hesitated and didn't want to immediately approach. As for the big wild rats that had jumped up and bit the ears of the grains, after smelling the smell, they wanted to take the grains in their mouths and fall to the ground. Their legs did not stand firm and they rolled a few times, but they were able to last longer than the other wild rats. Knowing that things had changed, they ran away with the grains in their mouths. Unfortunately, they were caught by the old man who was guarding outside. The old man used some of the leftover residue from the previous medicine to paint on the branches and leaves, circling around the wooden stick. After igniting the fire was extinguished, and smoke rose from the top. The smell of the smoke was more pungent, but unfortunately, the medicinal properties were far less than the powder that had been refined before. It was impossible to achieve the effect of poisoning. However, it was more than enough to deal with these big wild rats. Seeing Xiao Xian blocking the top of the mountain, the old man felt relieved and concentrated on dealing with the rats that had slipped through the net. These must be the ones with the grains in their mouths. Snatching food from the mouths of rats was what the old man wanted to do now. By the time Xiao Xian finished using the artifacts, a large number of wild rats had fallen on the top of the mountain, like a layer of rat skin carpet. As for the wild rats that had escaped the medicine, when they rushed up, they were swept away by Xiao Xian's broom. After the old man finished dealing with the rats that had slipped through the net, he immediately ran to the top of the mountain next to the plants and carefully touched the bunches of grains. Because he wasn't sure if this was an annual plant, he didn't dare to cut it. Otherwise, he would have asked Xiao Xian to cut it all and take it away. He wouldn't have stayed here to fight with the wild rats. Raising his hand and a little bit of force, the old man pulled out all the grains on the grains. Putting all the grains into a cloth bag, the old man called Xiao Xian. "Let's go. Don't worry about the rest of the wild rats." Waiting for the old man's words, Xiao Xian waved the broom, jumped up, and left the place with a few ups and downs. However, when he was out of the rat circle, Xiao Xian caught a few fat wild rats for a meal later. In this barren mountain, it was difficult to see big beasts, and it was not easy to eat meat. Taking advantage of this opportunity to catch a few. Take away the grains, and leave those in the same place. Are you not afraid of being destroyed by the wild rats? Don't you feel distressed? Xiao Xian asked the old man. If the old man didn't feel distressed about the plants, thinking that there was still research value, Xiao Xian wouldn't have to work so hard and would have just cut it off. The wild rats are not interested in those. They only want to eat these grains. As for the few that are left there, the roots are too deep. It's not easy to dig them out, and it's not convenient to take them away. Forget it. Next time, wait for me to go back and bring people over. As long as those few plants did not wither before he brought people over, he would transplant all of them to his own field and study them well. Those wild rats that were drugged woke up, I don't know if they will faint again. Aren't you afraid of their revenge? Xiao Xian joked. The old man holding the bag of grains heard Xiao Xian's words and raised his eyebrows. Revenge? Why should I be afraid? The next time I come, I won't give them a chance to retaliate. The next time he came, he would definitely bring more people, so he didn't have to be afraid of those wild rats. Leaving the mountain and looking for a place to sit down and rest, Xiao Xian reached out to the old man. Take it out and let me see what the legendary 1,000-grain gold looks like. I just went to sweep the wild rats and didn't pay attention to it. The old man hesitated and did not open the bag of grains. Instead, he took out a grain from another small bag and put it in Xiao Xian's palm. Xiao Xian looked at the soybean-sized round grain with a golden shell in his hand. There were teeth marks on it, the wild rats had bitten it. Although it was only so big, he could feel the obvious weight in his hand. It was much heavier than Xiao Xian thought. However, Xiao Xian didn't want to give up on such a broken grain. Anyway, I also have some merit. You're only giving me this. Xiao Xian pinched the broken grain and shook it in front of the old man. What do you want this for? The old man held the thing tightly. Eat. Concise and comprehensive. Hearing this, the old man's eyebrows almost stood up. Eat? Aren't these planted for eating? But we haven't started to plant a lot of them yet. These intact ones can only be used as seeds, they can't be eaten. The old man's attitude was very firm. Well, you give me some. I'll go back to the tribe later and plant them. Seeing the old man still want to say something, Xiao Xian added, even if I don't know how to plant them, there must be people in our tribe who know. Don't be stingy. Come on, let's divide. Anyway, there are thousands of grains. There are so many on the top of the mountain. Even if the wild rats took some, we can still get tens of thousands of grains. Let's divide it half and half. Half and half. The old man stared. Impossible, absolutely impossible. I can give you other things, but I can't give you so much of this. Well, half and half, 3,000 grains. Xiao Xian said. The old man held his breath and didn't say anything. Only the wrinkled skin on his old face twitched, as if he was trying his best to endure. In the end, the old man only gave Xiao Xian 1,000 grains. He still looked like he was cutting his own flesh. Every time he counted a grain, his heart would tremble and his liver would tremble. It was as if he had already foreseen the end of these grains being wasted into Xiao Xian's stomach. If it weren't for you helping me, I wouldn't have given you a single grain. The old man said with a bitter face. Hey, don't be so negative. Maybe you can't grow it, but I can grow it instead. Xiao Xian said. The old man just kept shaking his head. He didn't believe it anyway. Chapter 364. The old man may not have said much about other things, but the things he cared about were limited. 1,000 gold grains was one of them, and it occupied a large part of the old man's heart. You could tell just by looking at how much effort he had put in to come all the way to this desolate land to find it. If Xiao Xian wanted more, no matter what he said, even if they fought, the old man would rather die than agree. 1,000 pills was his last concession. I said I would use other things to make up for it. I don't have much on hand right now, so I can't give it to you. How about this, if you have time in the future, go to the royal city, say my name, and I'll give you whatever you want. The old man said as he handed Xiao Xian a small curved copper knife that looked like a small sickle. This is for you. If you go to the royal city, you can take this and let someone take you to me. Royal city. Xiao Xian was stunned. He raised his head and took the knife, looking at the old man. What is your full name? I am Ji Ju. Ji. Xiao Xian had heard of it before. That was the surname Wang. Many of the noble slave owners in the royal city had the surname Ji. They were the slave owners who owned the most land. The Ji royal family was also transformed from the people of the former Ji tribe. Later, the Ji tribe gathered all the other 5 major tribes, and Ji was the surname used by the people of the Ji tribe. A long time ago, on this land, the people of the tribe discovered another way to use the fire seed. Some of the tribesmen became slave owners and built cities, while the other maintained the appearance of a tribe. Do you always enslave a lot of slaves? Xiao Xian asked as he put the grains that Ji Ju handed over into the animal skin bag. Since he was the slave owner with the largest land, there should be a lot of slaves working under him. But Ji Ju's answer was not so. There are a lot of slaves. After all, I have a lot of land, so I have to let people take care of it. But I only enslave one slave. When Ji Ju said this, his face was full of pride. The difference between ordinary slaves and enslaved slaves was similar to the difference between wild beasts raised by Yanjiao tribes and engraved wild beasts. Xiao Xian had heard about this on the way, so he wasn't too surprised. He was just a little surprised that Ji Ju had only enslaved one slave. That must be a very powerful slave, Xiao Xian said. Of course, Huang Di is a very good slave. He can help me look after the fields. Speaking of this, Ji Ju missed his slave a little. Yellow Earth? Why did you give him that name? Xiao Xian asked. That's a pretty good name. I came up with it myself. Ji Ju disagreed with Xiao Xian's question. Also, who said that Huang Tudi is human? Then what is it? Xiao Xian was really curious now. Such an old slave owner had only enslaved one slave, and that only slave was not human. Ji Ju said proudly, "Mu, Xiao Xian." Mu? Bull. Yes. Do you think this slave is particularly good? I enslaved it when it was just a little bit. It's in charge of a large field in my hands. Ji Ju's old face was blooming. If I have the chance, I'd like to see it for myself, Xiao Xian said. Speaking of his own slave, the old man's depression dissipated a lot. He thought he had a good eye, and the smile on his face did not stop. His attention shifted from the 1,000-grain gold to his bull, and Ji Ju said a lot. Let me tell you, Xiao Xian, if you want to enslave slaves in the future, you have to pay attention to the first slave because the first slave is most likely to be the most loyal one, and also the one with the closest connection to your consciousness. No matter how good the other slaves are, they will always be a little worse. This is the commonality of slavery. That's why we slave owners are very careful when choosing the first slave. Some people even don't enslave slaves until they're middle-aged because they can't find a satisfactory slave. Ji Ju also brought up the topic of slavery. Seeing how Xiao Xian helped him so much, and because he found a plant suspected to be the 1,000-grain gold, he was in a good mood, so he told Xiao Xian all this. In fact, many slave owners know this, but you tribesmen may not. Of course, you tribesmen don't have much interest in enslaving slaves, and the success rate of enslavement is not high. You can't master the trick, Ji Ju said. Hearing Ji Ju's words, Xiao Xian's expression was strange. He asked, the first slave you enslave, is it very important? Very important. Ji Ju said with certainty. You have to choose carefully. Xiao Xian asked again. Yes. You can't enslave it casually. Nonsense. Ji Ju worriedly warned Xiao Xian, how can you enslave it casually? Our ancestors didn't know that the first slave was the most special, so they didn't pay attention to it. As a result, there were many slaves who betrayed their masters. Because of this, the slaves' characteristics and strengths were scattered, and they weren't loyal enough. Their consciousness wasn't connected tightly enough. That's why the most important thing about slaves is quality, not quantity, especially the first slave. Knowing that the situation here was different from the desert, Xiao Xian didn't ask much. But the first slave. He was too embarrassed to tell Ji Ju that he actually already had a slave. His first slave was a beetle that pushed a dung ball, and he enslaved it as an experiment. No wonder the blue beetle was so loyal. Xiao Xian could clearly feel the beetle's current state. Although he didn't know what it was doing now, he was sure that Sapphire was living well and strong. Xiao Xian didn't need to worry too much. After talking for a long time, Ji Ju realized that tribesmen weren't necessarily interested in enslavement. Many tribesmen were generally xenophobic, especially those from the larger tribes. It was said that even finding an outsider as a companion would require tribesmen to review repeatedly. Even if they passed the review, they might not be accepted immediately. You tribesmen are so troublesome. Right, which tribe are you from? Ji Ju kept forgetting to ask Xiao Xian this question. Yanjiao tribe, Xiao Xian said. On the way here with Ji Ju, he heard Ji Ju talk about tribesmen. He mentioned Yanjiao once, but it wasn't much. Ji Ju's understanding of Yanjiao was limited. He wasn't hostile, but he didn't have a good impression of them. In any case, Xiao Xian was very happy when he heard Ji Ju mention Yanjiao. Which one? Hearing Xiao Xian's answer, Ji Ju wanted to dig his ears out. Yanjiao, Xiao Xian said solemnly. Give me back the 1,000 grains. Ji Ju reached out, don't you Yanjiao hunt? How can you take good care of 1,000 grains? Yanjiao tribesmen rarely went to the royal city, but once or twice was enough to make a lasting impression. In Ji Ju's impression, Yanjiao tribesmen were strong. One person could carry a few bears and play with them. They were also rude and violent. Every time a Yanjiao tribesman went to the royal city, they would always send a few nobles flying. They were all rejected by the 6 nobles. However, Yanjiao tribesmen did come out less these years. The last time Ji Ju saw a Yanjiao tribesman was when he was young. Now, the younger generation might not have seen them. We Yanjiao tribesmen can also farm. Xiao Xian argued. Yanjiao's history had many records of farming. It was impossible that they couldn't even farm. Bullshit. Ji Ju was very regretful now. Unfortunately, he couldn't take back the grains he had given away. After a failed attempt, Ji Ju gave up. Fortunately, his focus was not here. He had to hurry back and bring people back to dig up the 1,000-grain gold plants. The royal city was far from here. Ji Ju didn't go any further. He parted ways with Xiao Xian. Right, do you remember where the Yanjiao tribe is? Xiao Xian asked before they parted. What, are you lost? Ji Ju laughed at his misfortune. However, he really didn't know the exact location of the Yanjiao tribe. I only know it's deep in the forest. It should be quite far from here. Take your time to find it. Chapter 365. After separating from Ji Ju, Xiao Xian continued on his journey. Knowing that there was really a Yanjiao tribe here, he felt a lot more at ease. Even if it was still far from the Yanjiao tribe, Xiao Xian still felt relaxed. Without Ji Ju, Xiao Xian sped up. Along the way, he saw some plants and made some herbs. He prepared some poisons and healing medicines, which Xiao Xian learned from Ji Ju. When he encountered good stone, he also made some spare stone tools. This was the advantage of stone tools. They were local materials and did not need to be forged. Xiao Xian also made a pot the size of a basin. Of course, it was much deeper than a basin. It was used to boil soup and decoct medicine. There were 2 ears on both sides of the stone pot. After the stone pot was used, the straw rope was threaded through the 2 ears and then carried on his back. He could take the pot with him whenever he wanted. This dry mountain range was really big. Xiao Xian gradually saw dense grassland on the 4th day after separating from Ji Ju. After passing the mountain range, the terrain became flat. Looking around, there was a vast grassland. He did not know if it was because of the season or because there was little rain here, but although there was a lot of grass on the ground, it was still dry. Trees suitable for the grassland environment were piled together or isolated in the middle of an empty grassland. This was also a major feature of the grassland here. There was also a river on the grassland, but it was not very big. Along the curved river bank, there were some unknown trees in a corridor on both sides. Compared to the vast grassland, there were not many trees growing here. The grass was rich and varied. Even if Xiao Xian knew a lot of forest grass from Ji-ju, there were still many unfamiliar things here. Xiao Xian did not have Ji-ju's detoxification constitution and did not dare to eat carelessly. Even when he was resting, he would choose carefully. Although it looked like an ordinary grassland, there were many hidden dangers. Sometimes, an inconspicuous blade of grass could take a person's life. When they saw Xiao Xian, the bison on the periphery stomped their strong hooves. Their thick and powerful limbs and iron hooves stepped on the grass like iron, easily stomped a hoof-shaped pit. They were demonstrating and warning Xiao Xian. A predator in the shape of a lion was hiding behind the dry shrubs. When it saw this scene, it reluctantly looked away from the herd and shifted its gaze to Xiao Xian. However, when it met Xiao Xian's gaze, the fur on its back stood on end. Its intuition told it to avoid this seemingly insignificant human. In the end, it decided to continue guarding the herd and wait for the right time to attack. Xiao Xian created a suitable hunting opportunity for the big cat. First, he threw some pungent herbs into the herd, causing the herd to become restless. Then, he seized the opportunity to kill a bison, and ran away with the bull on his shoulder. The big cat hiding behind the shrubs also took advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. After eating some of the roasted beef, Xiao Xian took out the stone pot and went to the river to scoop some water. After some thought, he added some 1,000-grain gold. Most of the 1,000-grain gold that he threw into the pot were incomplete grains that had been bitten by wild rats from Ji-ju. In Ji-ju's words, these grains did not have a high chance of surviving, but they could be eaten. Xiao Xian did not mind that the grains had been bitten by wild rats. After peeling the shells, he threw the golden grains into the pot and boiled them a little. Although there were too few grains compared to the pot of water, the boiled soup was a little turbid yellow. It had a faint fragrance and was very tempting. After eating too much meat, drinking this pot of soup was a good enjoyment. The cooked grains were soft and sticky in the mouth and tasted good. After drinking the soup, Xiao Xian felt much better. No wonder Ji-ju did not like the meat of wild animals. Eating this was indeed much better than eating wild animals. However, no matter how good it was for the body, Xiao Xian only had 1,000 grains on hand. 1,000 grains, although it sounded like a lot, when put together, it was only a little. Xiao Xian said that he wanted to try growing 1,000-grain gold. He was not joking. He really had this idea. If it was successful, when he went back to the other side of the sea in the future, he could bring a batch back to improve the lives of his tribe. After eating and resting, Xiao Xian put on his equipment and continued on his journey. The terrain of the grassland was slightly undulating. Sometimes, there were raised hills in the wilderness, and occasionally, there were some ant nests. 7 days after Xiao Xian stepped into the grassland. Under the clear sky, a few people were galloping on the grassland. Their tamed horses kicked up a trail of dust as they galloped on the dry grassland. Those people were probably having a competition. When they galloped on their horses, there was a fierce atmosphere of a duel. The people on the horses were wearing clothes sewn from a combination of fur and cloth. Their long hair was not cut short and was tied into several small braids. Both men and women had similar hairstyles. There were also some patterns drawn on their faces with paint. Xiao Xian carried 2 roasted bison thighs and a large stone pot on his back. His footsteps were light as he walked on the grassland. Compared to the fast galloping and tense atmosphere on the other side, Xiao Xian, who appeared as a stranger, seemed particularly leisurely. This abrupt style made the rider unable to ignore him. The young man at the front reined in his horse when he got close to Xiao Xian. When the people behind him saw this, they also stopped and looked at Xiao Xian with scrutinizing eyes. 2 of the young men gripped the daggers at their waists and pulled some out. Others put their hands on the knives hanging by the side of their horses. After the leader swept his gaze over Xiao Xian, his eyes became more cautious. However, His face was not as serious as before. With a smile, he asked Xiao Xian where he came from. Seeing the leader like this, the others looked at each other and changed their expressions. The young man who had touched the knife quietly moved his hand away. The one who pulled out the dagger put it back in the leather sheath at their waists. Their eyes paused for a moment on Xiao Xian's extremely special necklace. Then, like the others, they smiled at Xiao Xian, revealing their white teeth. The necklace around Xiao Xian's neck was actually made of bison horns and the fangs and claws of other predatory animals. For this group of people, a person who could hunt these grassland beasts and carry so much weight and still travel so easily was enough to make them think twice before making a move. Although this group of people had a friendly smile when they talked to Xiao Xian, that was because they thought Xiao Xian was not someone to be trifled with. If they were not to be trifled with, they would not trifle with them. If they were easy to bully, they would rob them and kill them. Bullying the weak and fearing the strong, the law of the jungle existed at all times in such a primitive environment. This was also the reason why Xiao Xian had made a necklace out of souvenirs from his hunts. After chatting with these people for a while, Xiao Xian did not directly tell them which tribe he was from. He only said that he had come back from an adventure and could not remember the way. He only asked about the surrounding terrain and gave them a cow's leg as a reward. These people's tribe was nearby, so they were familiar with the area. After receiving Xiao Xian's cow's leg, they heard from Xiao Xian that their tribe was deep in the dense forest. Since they had nothing to do, they pointed the way for Xiao Xian and even freed a horse for Xiao Xian to take Xiao Xian there. Although they had not been to further places and had only been active in the grassland area near their tribe, they had heard from their elders about the dense forest. When they became stronger, they would have the opportunity to be taken out, so they still knew some of the necessary geographical directions. Go straight from here and cross a few more mountains. You should be able to see it, the young leader said. They could only lead the way up to here and could not go any further. It would be dangerous if they went further. Then they looked at Xiao Xian, who was of the same age as them. He was able to travel on this dangerous grassland alone and was still alive and well. Those who were slightly dissatisfied with him before could only bear with it. Thank you. After riding for a while, Xiao Xian dismounted and thanked them. Then, he put on his equipment and continued on. After walking through the grassland and crossing a mountain range, he finally saw the scenery he was looking for. Standing high on the mountain, Xiao Xian looked at the dense greenery in the distance and breathed in the moist air. He threw the stone pot on his back and went down the mountain. Chapter 366. After crossing the mountain range, Xiao Xian could clearly feel the difference in climate. There were two completely different climates on both sides of the mountain range. It was as if the humidity and rain on this side were all blocked, preventing them from reaching the dry grassland on the other side of the mountain range. The further down he went, the more familiar Xiao Xian felt. This was his first time here, but this kind of environment always reminded him of the forest in his hunting grounds. Whether it was the forest on the other side of the river where the Yanjiao tribe was originally located, or the forest with ferocious beasts after returning to his homeland, they were all like this. As far as the eye could see, everything was green. It was a place full of vitality and danger. Xiao Xian's excitement was faintly overjoyed. He didn't know if it was because he was in a familiar environment, or because he was getting closer and closer to the Yanjiao tribe that he had been separated from for nearly 1,000 years. As he walked down the mountain, Xiao Xian threw away the exaggerated necklace made of beast claws and ox horns that he was wearing around his neck. He had already used up all the weapons he could use, and the necklace was just a trophy he had obtained from hunting. He also threw away the stone pot on his back that he used to boil soup. At this time, it was no longer a pretense but a burden. In a place like the mountain forest, he had to be more careful. He had to be as light as possible so that it was easier to hide and avoid. It had been more than half a year since Xiao Xian entered the desert. It was the first time he had been in such a mountain forest in such a long time. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian was surrounded by the moist smell of vegetation. He could hear the sounds of various birds, beasts, and insects. He lightened his footsteps and integrated himself into this new environment step by step. The wide river meandered through the dense forest into the distance. If one stood on a tree, they would be able to see figures swimming under the river from time to time. Sometimes it was some dark-colored fish, and sometimes it was some giant hunters lurking under the river, such as giant pythons. Xiao Xian sensed for a while. Although it wasn't as obvious as the fire seed, he could vaguely determine the location of the Yanjiao tribe. He took out the bone ornament around his neck that symbolized his status as an elder and looked at it. He touched the fiery red ball in the middle of the ornament and thought to himself, I wonder if I can use this identity in the Flaming Horn tribe. Do they still recognize me? Xiao Xian gathered his energy and continued to move in that direction. There were some traces of human activity here. Sometimes there were pieces of cloth, and sometimes there were some incomplete weapons that had been abandoned here. Xiao Xian even saw a human bone under a big tree. It was probably left behind by a beast after a hunter was killed here. After carefully identifying the traces around him, Xiao Xian quickly assessed the various creatures in this place. His footsteps were cautious but not slow. There was a well-camouflaged snake on a branch. At first glance, it was difficult to see that there was a poisonous creature lying in ambush. When Xiao Xian passed by, it wanted to bite him. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian was too fast and didn't give it any time to prepare. In the blink of an eye, he passed by under the tree. The snake lurking on the branch flicked its tongue, adjusted its posture, and continued to wait for the next prey to pass by. In addition to some tools used by humans, Xiao Xian also saw drawings carved on branches and stones. He didn't know which tribe had carved them. Some of the drawings were similar to totems, some were carved with words, and some were written with the names of the prey they had hunted, as if to show off their strength. Xiao Xian glanced at them. He recognized the words, but he didn't see any familiar drawings. The style was also unfamiliar. It seemed that they were from other tribes. The Yanjiao people should be farther away and didn't come here often. Since there were people moving around, Xiao Xian not only had to guard against the ferocious beasts lurking everywhere in the forest, but he also had to be vigilant against other people. Sometimes, people were more ferocious than ferocious beasts. After entering the forest, the deeper he went, the denser and thicker the trees became. Walking on the soft ground below, he could only feel a little yang-guang cast by the dense branches. On the third day of setting foot in this forest, Xiao Xian was walking in the forest when he suddenly felt a pair of eyes staring at him with a murderous intent. Although the other party tried to hide it, the murderous intent was too strong. With Xiao Xian's hunting experience, he keenly sensed it. He just didn't know if the other party was a human or a ferocious beast. Since the other party didn't move for the time being, Xiao Xian didn't take the initiative to attack. Instead, he continued to walk forward, wanting to see how the owner of the eyes hiding in the dark would act. Picking up his pace, Xiao Xian shuttled through the forest. That gaze was still following him closely. The other party's movements weren't slow, and they were good at hiding. If one looked around, they wouldn't be able to find the other party's figure at all. However, when the other party was in hot pursuit, Xiao Xian could clearly hear the sound of a sharp weapon cutting through tree trunks. Even if the sound was very soft, it could be easily covered by the sound of shaking branches. Another gust of wind blew, and the dense branches and leaves in the surrounding forest swayed. The friction between the leaves made a rustling sound. Occasionally, there was the sound of birds flying or landing. Identifying the movement behind him from the various sounds, Xiao Xian picked up his pace again. Like a nimble wind, he shuttled through the forest. His feet made several sharp turns, changing directions. After the seventh sharp turn, Xiao Xian found a large tree nearby. With a leap, he nimbly leaped up the tree and hid in the dense foliage. There were some flying insects resting on the tree. A colorful insect was resting on the treetop. Xiao Xian's sudden jump scared it so much that it almost rolled off the leaves. Behind Xiao Xian, a slender figure shot towards Xiao Xian like an arrow through an unnoticeable crack in the rough bark. If this kind of insect bit a person, it would drill straight into the person's body. Xiao Xian didn't even turn his head. He casually snapped off a branch and threw it at the insect. The branch had a sharp edge, and it directly nailed the insect to the thick bark. The insect that was nailed to the bark twisted its body, as if trying to break free from the fate of being nailed to the tree, but it was powerless. Xiao Xian didn't even look at the insect. His ears carefully listened to the small cutting sounds that were quickly approaching. His eyes were fixed in the direction of the sound. A brown figure flashed like a shadow. When it passed by a tree, it paused for a moment, and then left at an even faster speed. As if sensing that Xiao Xian was deliberately hiding, the brown figure suddenly circled around a tree when it was about to reach the tree that Xiao Xian was at. Then, it disappeared behind the tree. Xiao Xian frowned slightly. His eyes were fixed in that direction, but his attention was focused on his surroundings. The other party was indeed watching him. He was also very smart, sharp, and very good at hiding. Xiao Xian clenched the black dagger in his hand and focused. A figure suddenly circled around the tree trunk behind Xiao Xian. A sharp cold light burst out, neatly cutting through the branches and leaves in front of it. A threatening murderous aura instantly filled the small space in the tree. With a cruel intent, the sharp light drew an arc and swept directly towards Xiao Xian. Chapter 367. Xiao Xian immediately jumped away from the tree the moment his opponent appeared. This opponent was not suited for close combat. If he got too close, Xiao Xian would only be at a disadvantage. His opponent was agile and had a natural advantage. It was a strange-looking animal. It looked like a brown monkey, but it was not. Its limbs were long and agile, and its feet and toes were long. Its claws were as sharp as sickles and could be retracted into its toes like a cat. When it waved its arms, it looked like a whip with a blade attached to its front end. When it moved stealthily, it would retract its claws and move stealthily. When it waved its claws at Xiao Xian, the ferocity in its eyes and the fangs in its mouth showed that this ferocious animal was in a state of resentment. It did not look like it was facing its prey, but more like it was facing its enemy. This made Xiao Xian very puzzled. This animal was very smart. It was not big, but it was a real dire beast. The emotion in its eyes was too strong. Xiao Xian could not ignore it even if he wanted to. It was his first time in this place, and he did not know how he had offended it. As he came down from the tree, the sharp edges behind him closed in. Amidst the threatening murderous aura, the cold gleam of the sharp claws was like an angry slaughterer waving the scythe of the grim reaper, eager to reap all life. The dense intertwining of claws made Xiao Xian unable to find a good opportunity to counterattack. Xiao Xian stomped his feet on the ground and left his original position, leaving a pit in the ground. The surrounding soft soil and leaves splashed up, turning into debris as the claws approached. Xiao Xian quickly ran through the dense forest. The pursuer behind him was still in a strong mood, and it could not wait to pounce on him. Xiao Xian was already very fast, but this time, his opponent had no intention of hiding. It also gave chase, and Xiao Xian did not leave it far behind. It was agile, fast, and every strike carried a strong murderous aura. Its claws were many, long, and sharp. It was also very clever. It seemed to be familiar with humans. What was the best way to deal with such a ferocious beast? There seemed to be a tense atmosphere in the dense forest because of this chase. The other beasts did not intend to intervene, and they could not keep up with the speed of the two. The sound of tree trunks being cut rang out again. The ferocious beast was using the tree trunks to increase its speed. The louder the sound of tree trunks being cut, the greater the force used by the other party. It was still accelerating. He was probably annoyed by Xiao Xian running around and couldn't wait any longer. With the way the other party cut it, if it was a slightly thinner tree trunk, it would probably have been cut in half. Cut the tree trunk. Xiao Xian slightly slowed down his speed, and with a quick turn, the totemic power in his body instantly increased. The flame-like totemic patterns almost covered his entire body, and the totemic power in his body rushed to his legs like a flood, causing the muscles in his legs to swell up. After making a sharp turn, Xiao Xian circled around, aimed at a tree, raised his leg, and kicked. Crack! The tree trunk, which was as thick as 3 people hugging it, was directly broken. The broken tree trunk crashed directly into the brown ferocious beast that was chasing after him. The ferocious beast that was chasing closely did not expect Xiao Xian to do this. Originally, when Xiao Xian slowed down, it had almost caught up. Its claws were already itching for blood, as if it could drink it in the next moment. However, it was greeted with such a ferocious attack. Bang! The brown figure was sent flying by the broken tree trunk, and smashed into the trunk of another tree, letting out a sharp cry. However, although this ferocious beast looked thin, it was still a ferocious beast. Its body was strong, and although it was painful to be hit like this, it was not fatal. It was still a long way from being seriously injured. Xiao Xian wanted to follow up with another attack, but the ferocious beast's reaction was very fast. When it fell from the tree trunk, its front limbs were like soft whips, and it swayed its body to avoid a direct collision with Xiao Xian. The ferocious beast that fell into the grass and retreated a few steps landed on all fours. Its body was tense, and its eyes that were staring at Xiao Xian flashed with a dark light. It seemed to be thinking of something, or perhaps it was weighing the current situation. Just when Xiao Xian thought that it would attack again, he found that the ferocious beast gave up on colliding with him, and turned to leave. This was the decision it made after weighing the pros and cons. Perhaps it realized that Xiao Xian was not an easy person to deal with. However, it was too late to leave now. Xiao Xian would not let go of the ferocious beast that attacked him. This time, the roles of the pursuer were reversed. The party that was originally chasing was now eager to escape. And the party that was being chased became the hunter. Crack! 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 From time to time, the sound of tree trunks being kicked could be heard in the forest. Some of the birds resting in the trees were startled and flew away. The originally quiet forest became restless. The ferocious beasts that were walking in that direction twitched their ears, turned around, and left. They did not want to encounter such a barbaric and violent method. Anyway, they were not the unlucky ones, so they would not get involved. The tree trunks that were constantly being kicked off did not directly hit the target every time, but even if they did not hit the target, they still brought some obstruction to the brown ferocious beast. At this time, the ferocious beast was very regretful of provoking this person. It originally only wanted to vent its anger on this person, but it did not expect to hit an iron plate. It had never been afraid of close combat with humans, and it thought that it could still deal with them. Especially when the other party was young and alone, it would be easier to deal with. However, when it encountered a person who directly used a tree trunk as a weapon, no matter how sharp its claws were, it could not cut through such a thick trunk in one go. It was certain that it would be smashed if it could not dodge. Its mind was in a mess, and it could not make the most correct response in the first place. The more chaotic it was, the more it would be smashed. In the forest, Xiao Xian had caught up with the ferocious beast at some point, and he was even a bit ahead of it. Crack! Another tree trunk was kicked off, and the timing was very accurate. It directly hit the ferocious beast from the side. The thick tree trunk with the smell of moss brought a strong wind, as if it was going to blow away everything in its path. The ferocious beast that was hit let out a painful cry again and fell to the ground. The ferocious beast that was hit by the tree trunks did not immediately get up this time. It was hit a little hard. Seeing that the ferocious beast wanted to escape, Xiao Xian picked up the fallen tree trunk next to him and used it as a club to sweep it over. Bang! The ferocious beast that had just stood up was hit again. The ferocious beast that fell to the ground let out a scream. It was no longer the ferocious roar from before, but a series of short cries. Coupled with the pitiful emotion in its eyes, it seemed to be begging for mercy. It even retracted its claws, hugged its head, and curled up there, screaming at Xiao Xian. Seeing this, Xiao Xian threw away the thick tree trunk, pulled a long vine from a tree, and tied it up. Before the ferocious beast could react, the vine knot had already wrapped around its body. Its whip-like limbs were tied up, and even if it reached out with its claws, it could not immediately cut off all the vines. After tying it up, Xiao Xian grabbed it by the neck and lifted it up. Feeling the 5 fingers around its throat tighten, the ferocious beast with brown fur found it more and more difficult to breathe. It was injured, and with its neck strangled, it was already somewhat powerless. It struggled to move its bound limbs, but it was useless. Lifting the ferocious beast, Xiao Xian wanted to figure out why this ferocious beast was so hostile towards him. Suddenly, his ears twitched. He heard a few rapid footsteps approaching. It was probably the commotion just now that had attracted them. Were they from the nearby tribes? Or was it someone else? These people came quickly. Every one of them was burly, and their steps were hurried. Obviously, they did not expect to see other tribesmen here. The 5 of them stopped when they got close. When they saw the ferocious beast in Xiao Xian's hands, one of them wanted to say something, but was stopped by his companion. Xiao Xian's back was facing them, so the 5 of them could not see Xiao Xian's face clearly. Moreover, Xiao Xian was wearing a cotton garment. To prevent poisonous insects from the forest, Xiao Xian had added some animal skin. Although the cloth and animal skin were somewhat worn out, they blocked most of the totemic tattoos on his arms and legs, so the 5 of them could not see clearly. The 5 of them looked at each other, and the most stable of them stepped forward. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Xian had already turned around. Seeing the totemic tattoos on Xiao Xian's face that had not yet disappeared, the person who was about to speak was stunned. The corners of his eyes twitched, and the others' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They were roaring in their hearts. Holy shit, how could there be Yanjiao people here? Chapter 368. Their team had chased the long-clawed monkey all the way here. Originally, they had been thrown off by the cunning monkey. After losing their target, the team had split up to look for it. The 5 of them had rushed over because they had suddenly heard the movement here. Especially when they heard the long-clawed monkey's cry, they already knew that someone had intercepted the long-clawed monkey. Naturally, they were anxious, but they never thought that the ones who had intercepted their target would be Yanjiao people. They had clearly determined that there were no Yanjiao people following them. This time, they had been closely guarded from beginning to end. Except for a few people who knew about it, even most of the people in their own tribe didn't know about it. Unfortunately, they had unexpectedly encountered it. They had encountered it so far away. They just didn't know if it was a coincidence or deliberate. Were there other Yanjiao people around? If there weren't, with such a young warrior, they should be able to snatch back the prey with the strength of the 5 of them. The 5 of them had been hunting together for a long time, so they only needed a few glances to know what each other was thinking. Especially the leader, after quickly exchanging glances with his companions, he looked at Xiao Xian. I didn't expect to meet Yanjiao people here. Didn't you go out to hunt? The man asked. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. The other party had misunderstood, and he didn't want to correct it. He just let the other party misunderstand. When he didn't understand the situation, the more he said, the more wrong he would be. It was better to listen and get a lot of information. From the tone of the 5 people, Xiao Xian speculated that the tribes these people belonged to were Yanjiao's opponents. Even if they weren't hostile, they were certainly competitors, so he didn't need to be polite. However, this relationship didn't seem to be bad to the point of being irreconcilable. Xiao Xian was thinking about how to treat them. "Why do I meet you Yanjiao people everywhere?" one of them whispered. His expression was very tangled, with anger and helplessness. His tone was a bit harsh. Although the other party's voice wasn't loud, everyone present heard it clearly. Seeing that the two groups didn't seem to have a good relationship, the long-clawed monkey held by Xiao Xian turned its eyes and made a few difficult sounds from its throat. Its tied legs struggled to kick, looking like it was about to be strangled to death. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian didn't say anything, and the 5 people just glanced at it. They didn't care whether it lived or died. "I'm really sorry, brother from Yanjiao. This long-clawed monkey is the prey we've been tracking," said the leader. The other party's tone was calm, but they didn't sound too intimate. Even if they tried their best to control themselves, Xiao Xian could still see the tension in their expressions. They were on guard and ready to fight at any moment. Xiao Xian looked at the person who had just spoken and raised his chin. "Continue. Continue. Continue what?" The leader paused, thinking that Xiao Xian didn't take the long-clawed monkey seriously. He was delighted and said, "We can use other prey to exchange with you, a vicious beast of similar level with meat." He emphasized the words, level, and meat. "That should be fine, right?" Xiao Xian made a gesture of thinking, and then said to the 5 people, "No exchange." "You." One of the people couldn't help but point at Xiao Xian and threaten him. "So what if you're more powerful? You're only one person, and we have 5. In any case, most of the people from Yanjiao should be hunting at this time. This person must have snuck out to play by himself. He actually ran so far. Could it be that he deliberately followed them?" No matter what the other party thought, Xiao Xian's expression didn't change in the slightest because of the other party's threat. He said, "The 5 of you didn't catch it. You're really capable. Since I caught this long-clawed monkey, it's my prey. What does it have to do with you?" The 5 people didn't know that their attitude had been exposed, and that it had also decided Xiao Xian's choice. If they had revealed that they had a good relationship with Yanjiao, Xiao Xian wouldn't have rejected their words so directly and mercilessly. Seeing the other party move, Xiao Xian said again, "What, do you want to rob it? If you don't exchange, we can only rob it." The leader of the other party didn't have the calm expression he had before. His eyes suddenly changed, and he was full of murderous intent. Facing such a person with a slightly lower strength would certainly be a lot of pressure. Xiao Xian chuckled. "Just with you." They were angered by Xiao Xian's attitude. They knew that the Yanjiao people's threats were mostly ineffective, so they were prepared to rob it. The 5 people suddenly exploded, and water-like totem patterns appeared like waves on their bodies. Among them, there were 2 senior totem warriors and 3 intermediate totem warriors. If they didn't have some strength, they wouldn't have been able to follow them on this secret operation. The 5 people knew that the Yanjiao people's biggest characteristic was their great strength. Therefore, it would be a stupid choice to fight the Yanjiao people with strength. They decided to fight with other things, such as speed and flexibility, as well as their advantage in numbers. Compared to most people, the Yanjiao people's speed and flexibility when hunting was not much inferior, but compared to their advantage in strength, it wasn't paid much attention. From the 5 people's movements, Xiao Xian guessed their strategy. The 2 senior totem warriors rushed towards Xiao Xian from the left and right, trying to trap Xiao Xian in a pincer attack. Facing the totem warriors of 5 strange tribes alone, Xiao Xian did not feel the slightest psychological pressure. In order to facilitate the battle, he grabbed the long-clawed monkey's arm and threw the ferocious beast directly towards a thick tree not far away. At the same time that Xiao Xian threw the long-clawed monkey, the 5 people were happy, especially the 3 in the back. Their footsteps changed, bypassing the place where Xiao Xian was, and directly rushed towards the place where the long-clawed monkey was thrown. Even if its hands and feet were tied by vines, the long-clawed monkey's flexibility was still there. Before, because it was tightly held in Xiao Xian's hand, its neck would have been directly broken if it made the slightest movement. Therefore, it only dared to show weakness and didn't dare to show any devious thoughts. But now, seeing the two sides fighting, its brain began to move. Its body that was thrown in the air rotated, and its tied legs adjusted the arc. When it hit the trunk, its legs acted as a good cushion, so it wasn't hurt. Instead, it used this force to bounce away, wanting to take advantage of the chaos to escape. It wasn't that it despised these people, but with its ability, after breaking free, it would certainly be able to get rid of the trouble. If it could get rid of these people chasing it once, it could get rid of them a second time. Unfortunately, it struggled, but couldn't break free. It struggled again, but still couldn't break free. Although this kind of vine was very flexible and not easy to break, the long-clawed monkey really didn't care about this vine. It had been tied up by some tribes with this kind of vine, but it had always broken free. It had long been experienced in dealing with this kind of vine. Many times, it would deliberately show weakness and let itself be tied up, then escape. It would hide in the dark and laugh as it looked at the angry appearance of those people who were jumping up and down. But this time, it made a mistake. It thought that after getting rid of Xiao Xian's control, it could easily break free from the vine, but the fact was not so. No matter how skillfully it tried, its knife-like long claws couldn't hook the vine, let alone cut it. Naturally, it couldn't get out of the vine. The long-clawed monkey was still tied up, and its ability to move was greatly reduced. It didn't run far before it was caught by the three people chasing after it. Its resistance was futile, otherwise, it would have to face the knives of these three people. These people didn't care whether it was dead or alive. Therefore, the long-clawed monkey, who was caught again, became listless again, obediently being carried away, and its mind was thinking about how to escape. On the other side, Xiao Xian, who was attacked from left and right, quickly retreated a few steps to avoid the siege of the two sides. In the face of the people who were closing in on him, Xiao Xian's feet didn't stop, and his body was still running. Facing the knife wind, he twisted his body and leaned to the side, avoiding the opponent's cut. At the same time, he shook his shoulders and directly hit the opponent. In the face of Xiao Xian's strong collision, the opponent gritted his teeth and braced himself to meet this blow. No matter what, he was also a senior totem warrior, why should he be afraid? This person was younger than him, and didn't look as strong as him. This person wasn't one of the most outstanding people in Yanjiao. The two forces and the force collided together, and made a muffled sound. If the opponent's momentum was like a surging torrent, then Xiao Xian was like a towering mountain firmly rooted in the earth. Under the collision, the man shook, and his pupils shrank in surprise. He took a few steps back to dissolve the force of the collision, and then looked at the person who didn't even take half a step back. This result showed that he didn't have the upper hand at all. Although he knew that he couldn't win, he didn't expect that there would be such a big gap. Chapter 369. After knocking one person away, Xiao Xian didn't retreat. Instead, he stomped on the ground with both feet and turned around to throw a punch. The power of the punch was like a cannon, no less than the force he used to kick the tree trunk when he caught the long-clawed monkey. In the face of such a powerful punch, the person chasing after Xiao Xian could only dodge first. With the scene of his companion being brutally knocked away, he wasn't stupid enough to underestimate the strength of the other party just because he was young. The Yanjiao people were really a bunch of powerful monsters. No matter how much these two people criticized the strength of the Yanjiao people, they had already achieved their goal. They had delayed Xiao Xian, and then let their three companions take the prey away. Now, even if this Yanjiao person chased again, he might not be able to catch up, right? Just as the two people thought this, Xiao Xian moved. Ignoring these two people, Xiao Xian chased after the three people who took the long-clawed monkey away. When hunting, speed was very important. Many prey in the forest ran like the wind. Even if the body of the wild boar looked heavy, when it really ran at full speed, not everyone could catch up. Therefore, from the beginning of the hunt, the Yinjiao people didn't ignore the importance of speed. It was just that people's impression of the Yinjiao people was always based on the characteristics of great strength, ignoring their other abilities. Xiao Xian's speed was at the forefront of the tribe. Even the two tribe leaders, Ta and Gigu, had to admit this point. Now that his strength had increased, his speed was even faster. Therefore, once Xiao Xian started running, the two people who surrounded Xiao Xian were dumbfounded. Thinking about it, how could someone who could catch the long-clawed monkey be slow? It was still too early for them to relax. Seeing Xiao Xian's movements, the two people could only chase after him, hoping to intercept Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's totemic power burst out from his body. Under the flame-like totemic patterns, the strength in his muscles pushed his body forward. Xiao Xian lowered his body and rushed forward, moving at high speed and agility in the dense forest. He was not hindered by the bushes in the forest. Xiao Xian's clothes made a beast-like growl as he ran. The insects and birds on the tree couldn't see him clearly. Xiao Xian had already passed by the tree, and two figures were hot on his heels. The rapidly advancing silhouette was like a slithering snake, and the ferocious aura that locked onto its prey was like that of a wolf in the night. The two people chasing after Xiao Xian couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. How did another monster suddenly appear in Yinjiao? If they hadn't bumped into him, how long would he have hidden for? Are you planning to launch a sneak attack in the future? Seeing that Xiao Xian was getting closer and closer to the three people in front of him, the two people chasing after Xiao Xian became anxious. They sped up again, and one of them even took out the tree thorn hidden weapon that he had carefully prepared to deal with the long-clawed monkey. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian didn't give them the chance. The ground in front of him wasn't flat. There were all kinds of twining roots and dense vines. It was easy to get entangled. If he had to take care of these things, his speed would definitely slow down. The three people in front of him were the same. Compared to their initial speed, they had already slowed down. Therefore, in order to catch up with the three people in front of him as soon as possible, Xiao Xian planned to chase them from the air. While chasing after the long-clawed monkey, Xiao Xian had paid attention to the way the monkey ran. He had also tried it. He could have caught the monkey faster, but he still chased it for so long. He was trying to use this method. Every time he caught up, he would kick a tree to scare the monkey, not letting it run out of his sight. Then he would continue to observe its movements until he got the hang of it. Xiao Xian clenched the black dagger, turned around and swung his arm. The two people behind him only heard a cheat sound. The figure in front of them directly used the trunk of a tree to float in the air from a height of about 3 people. On the trunk that he had passed by, there was an additional inconspicuous footprint and a knife mark. Chi! 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 In the dense forest, with a series of sounds, a very fast figure completely left the ground. Xiao Xian didn't care about the bushes on the ground, the old roots buried under the decaying and fallen leaves, the slippery moss and fungus secretions, and so on. Although his running speed was slower than on flat ground, in the forest, he was indeed faster than the other people. Sometimes he could quickly circle around the trees to avoid the hidden weapons thrown behind him. Seeing this scene, the two people who were chasing after him were shocked. He was actually imitating the behavior of the long-clawed monkey. Chase! Chase! They couldn't catch up. Damn! They miscalculated. This Yanjiao's speed was too fast. Seeing Xiao Xian's figure getting farther and farther away, the powerlessness in the hearts of the two people became heavier and heavier. The trees in this forest had very few branches when they were 7 or 8 meters above the ground. The higher they went, the more branches there would be. Even if they stepped on these branches, they would have to avoid other branches. This was also the reason why the long-clawed monkey could run quickly in the forest. It didn't have to worry about obstacles on the ground, nor did it have to face the dense intertwining branches on the trees. It also didn't have to step on the tree trunks to run. It had its own way of running. And now, this way of running was learned by the Yinjiao. The two people also wanted to imitate it, but unfortunately, they used the wrong force. Not only did they not accelerate in the air, but they also slowed down. At this time, there was no time to make more attempts. They had no choice but to continue to step on the branches of the trees or run on the ground. When they saw their three companions again, they were already lying on the ground in a daze. They weren't seriously injured. After checking the injuries of the three people, the leader's heart was a little relieved. Then should we thank that kid for being lenient on account of the two tribes being neighbors? Another person said discouragingly. The others didn't say anything. Obviously, the other party really was lenient. Otherwise, with just the three of them, the other party had an absolute advantage in strength and speed. It would be easy for him to kill them. Xiao Xian really was lenient. After all, the purpose of these 5 people was to snatch the prey. When facing Xiao Xian, they only blocked him and didn't really kill him. Xiao Xian would naturally be a little lighter. That, was it also caused by him? The leader pointed to several broken trees in front of them that were blocking the road and asked. Yes. The 3 people's faces were dejected. After being slapped to the ground by the other party, they wanted to get up and chase, but the sound of the branches breaking made them stop. The other party was warning them. Thinking about it made their chests tighten. What should we do? Someone asked. What else can we do? Meet up with the others and tell them that the thing was stolen by a Yinjiao. The leader said angrily. Their skills were inferior, so they admitted defeat. It would be difficult for them to take out the thing that entered the Yinjiao's pocket. After going back, the tribes would probably have a good talk with the Yinjiao. Thinking that the elders of the 2 tribes might once again engage in a war of words, they could already foresee how smug the Yinjiao people would be. TSK, so fucking sullen. On the other side, Xiao Xian brought the listless long-clawed monkey to a secluded place and patted its drooping head. Don't play dead. Take out the thing. The long-clawed monkey looked up at Xiao Xian and seemed to be at a loss. Still playing dumb with me. Take out the thing. Xiao Xian tapped its shoulder with the back of his short knife. Those people were so persistent in wanting to bring back this vicious beast, whether dead or alive, there must be another purpose. This long-clawed monkey had something they were looking for. Chapter 370. It was smart enough and seemed to understand human behavior very well. This long-clawed monkey seemed to know a lot. Xiao Xian stared at the long-clawed monkey, staring at it until all of its hair almost stood up. It originally wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape, but it didn't expect to fall into Xiao Xian's hands. The long-clawed monkey was now very scared. It was still okay when it was caught by those people. It still had the confidence to think of various ways to escape. However, facing Xiao Xian, it felt a lot of pressure. After holding back for a long time, the long-clawed monkey let out a vague cry, as if it was still quibbling. Not giving it. Xiao Xian glanced at the long-clawed monkey. Fine, I'll just kill you. Seeing that Xiao Xian was about to use his knife, the long-clawed monkey became anxious. It let out a few hurried screams. Its eyes were full of pleading as it looked at Xiao Xian. Its eyes reflected light, as if they were full of stars. People who saw these eyes would inexplicably feel a soft feeling in their heart. Xiao Xian was also shaken for a moment, but soon he knew that this was a psychological attack. This long-clawed monkey had a lot of cards up its sleeve. Sure enough, seeing that Xiao Xian recovered in the blink of an eye, the long-clawed monkey's eyes changed. Its eyes that were like a vast starry sky suddenly brewed a storm like a hurricane. Its face also became ferocious. It opened its mouth wide, revealing 2 rows of teeth. 4 long fangs filled the surrounding air with a bloody aura. If the long-clawed monkey's eyes were as bright and clear as a child's, then now it was like an evil spirit in a scorching hell. Such a sudden change would cause a psychological impact and pressure on people. In the face of such a change, some timid people would be scared out of their wits and would be affected for a long time. Their behavior would also be affected due to panic and make mistakes. Xiao Xian slightly stepped back, but he didn't panic. He raised his hand and placed it not far from the long-clawed monkey's forehead. Under the fierce gaze of the long-clawed monkey, a blue flame emerged from his palm. The long-clawed monkey's ghost-like expression stiffened, and the viciousness in its eyes completely disappeared, leaving only fear. A sharp cry came from its throat as it tried its best to move its legs to avoid Xiao Xian's palm. It wanted to leave this place, but it was bound by the vines and couldn't break free. It couldn't run at all. What do you think? The choice is up to you. If you tell me honestly, I can let you go. But if you still want to hide it, then don't blame me, Xiao Xian said. This time, the long-clawed monkey didn't have the slightest bit of wishful thinking. It knew what that flame was, but it didn't expect to see it in the forest. It was extremely disgusted and afraid of that blue flame. Humming and trembling, as if it had made up its mind, the long-clawed monkey adjusted its posture. Its stomach swelled and contracted, as if something was squirming inside. Then, something not much bigger than an adult's fist rolled out of the monkey's mouth. Xiao Xian frowned as he tore off a leaf from a nearby tree. He picked up the thing that rolled out and wiped off the mucus on the outside. Fruit. Xiao Xian was puzzled. Because the fruit had a thick layer of skin, even if it was swallowed by the long-clawed monkey, it wasn't digested. After wiping off the outer layer of dirt, a faint fragrance came out. It wasn't strong, but it was intoxicating. Although he didn't know what it was, the previous behavior of the 5 people and the long-clawed monkey's painful expression told Xiao Xian that this fruit was very special. Whether it was for humans or berserk beasts, it would certainly have great benefits. While Xiao Xian was observing the fruit, the long-clawed monkey was restless. From time to time, it quickly glanced at Xiao Xian, but it didn't dare to look directly at him. Its claws dug into the ground, but it didn't dare to directly stretch out its claws. It was afraid that Xiao Xian would really cut off its claws. Those people were looking for this. Xiao Xian held the fruit and looked at the long-clawed monkey. The long-clawed monkey nodded again and again. Xiao Xian nodded, and then under the reluctant gaze of the long-clawed monkey, he wrapped the fruit in clean leaves and put it in his animal skin bag. Seeing Xiao Xian looking at itself again, the long-clawed monkey quickly withdrew its gaze from the fruit. Its body curled up and looked at Xiao Xian eagerly, waiting for Xiao Xian to fulfill his promise. Xiao Xian didn't really want to enslave this long-clawed monkey. He didn't plan to enslave a second slave. He didn't know much about slavery. After inquiring about Ji Ju's words, he found that there were a lot of things involved. If he didn't pay attention, he might get himself into trouble. For things that he didn't know much about, Xiao Xian still treated with a cautious attitude. Picking up the stone knife, under the frightened eyes of the long-clawed monkey, Xiao Xian waved it. The long-clawed monkey, who closed its eyes in fear, felt the bindings on its body loosen. It suddenly opened its eyes, and a flash of joy appeared in its eyes. For a moment, it thought about whether or not to grab the fruit back, but it still rejected the idea. This person was different from the people it had met before. It was lucky to escape this time. If it were to court death again, it would probably become this person's food. No longer thinking about it, the long-clawed monkey suppressed the emotions in its heart. It was about to leave when it heard Xiao Xian say, "Wait a minute." The long-clawed monkey's footsteps stiffened. It turned around like a rusty robot, wondering if Xiao Xian was going back on his word. "Do you know the Yanjiao tribe?" Xiao Xian asked. The long-clawed monkey was stunned by this question. and then it raised its hand and pointed in a direction with some doubts. It made a squeak sound, as if it didn't understand why Xiao Xian said this. Instead, it asked Xiao Xian if he was pointing in the direction of the Yanjiao tribe. It had seen the Yanjiao people and could feel that Xiao Xian and the Yanjiao people's breath were similar, so it was confused after hearing Xiao Xian's words. In that direction. Xiao Xian looked, and it was consistent with the route he had decided on. Squeak. The long-clawed monkey vigorously nodded. No matter what Xiao Xian meant, it just nodded. Okay, you can go. Xiao Xian waved his hand. This time, the long-clawed monkey didn't leave step by step. Instead, it fiercely kicked its legs, and its figure flashed and disappeared. It ran very eagerly, and secretly decided that if it saw Xiao Xian in the future, it would take a detour. After sorting out his things, Xiao Xian continued on his way. The 5 people that Xiao Xian got rid of, after meeting up with their companions, looked around the forest, but didn't see Xiao Xian's figure. Seeing that the time set by the chief was getting closer and closer, they could only go back with a belly full of unwillingness. They were the people of the Taihe tribe, which was adjacent to the Yanjiao tribe's territory. Quarrels were common. If the thing was stolen by someone else, it would be fine, but it just had to be a Yanjiao person, so they felt very sullen. When the team that went out to hunt down the long-clawed monkey returned to the Taihe tribe, they told the chief and other elders that the operation had failed, and that the thing was stolen by a Yanjiao person. As expected, whether it was the chief or the several elders, they all had a belly full of sullen anger. Previously, when a warrior of their tribe went out to hunt, he found a rare fruit that was about to ripen in the forest, but there were many fierce beasts lying in ambush around. With only 2 or 3 people, it was impossible to safely snatch it, so they immediately returned to the tribe and secretly told the chief. The fruit was a kind of fruit that could gently improve the strength of a warrior. It was very rare because there were many animals in the forest that liked the fruit. The fruit was also very good for their improvement. Moreover, the smell of the fruit was very light, and the animals in the forest had a much more sensitive sense of smell than humans. Perhaps they could detect the movement of the fruit from thousands of miles away, but humans couldn't. This was also the reason why these animals could always find the fruit before humans. The reason why the fruit was rare was that after many fruits ripened, they would be snatched by various fierce beasts before humans could find them. Historical experience and lessons taught the people of the Taihe tribe that after finding a good thing, the first thing to guard against was not the various fierce beasts lurking around the fruit, but their barbaric neighbor, the Yanjiao tribe. Therefore, in order to get the fruit back, after the chief and several elders of the Taihe tribe discussed with each other, they didn't make this matter public. Instead, they secretly sent a team to carefully avoid the sight of the Yanjiao tribe and secretly went to the place where the fruit was located. They would wait for the fruit to ripen and snatch it back. It just so happened that the Yanjiao tribe was in the middle of a hunting activity, so they didn't notice the movements of the Taihe tribe. Unfortunately, when the people of the Taihe tribe were snatching the fruit, a very fast long-clawed monkey was 1 step ahead of them and swallowed the fruit. Therefore, 2 of them went back to the tribe to inform the chief of this matter, while the others chased after the long-clawed monkey. However, the long-clawed monkey was very fast in the forest, and it was very difficult for them to track it. They chased and lost it, so they had to divide into several small teams to search for it. The large forest was far away from the tribe, and the environment was relatively unfamiliar, so it was difficult for them to find it. Finally, the 5 people heard the movement and rushed over. They found the long-clawed monkey, but unfortunately, they couldn't snatch it. Looking for the fruit, it was snatched by the long-clawed monkey. Catching the long-clawed monkey, it was snatched by the Yanjiao tribe. Snatching it from the Yanjiao tribe, they lost. Snatching it, they couldn't snatch it. Fight? They couldn't beat it. They tried to guard against it, but in the end, they still couldn't guard against the Yanjiao tribe. How could they not be angry? A gray-haired elder of the Taihe tribe felt the fire on his head, and his beard was sticking up. He pointed at the people who came back and scolded them, and finally concluded, "You can't even beat a Yanjiao tribe." The people who were being scolded lowered their heads, and thought in their hearts, "What do you mean by, can't even beat a Yanjiao tribe? Is it easy to beat a Yanjiao tribe? It's easy to say, but why don't you fight? Aren't you the same old man from Yanjiao every time?" They only dared to think about it, but didn't dare to say it out loud. Not being able to beat a Yanjiao tribe was indeed not something to be proud of. Clearly, their tribe had more people than the Yanjiao tribe, so why was it that the Taihe tribe suffered most of the time? And on the Yanjiao tribe's side, after a fierce hunting activity, the team also brought the prey back to the tribe. Along the way, they met a few old rivals of the Taihe tribe. Hearing the other party's sarcastic words, the leader of the team was baffled. He knew every word of the other party's words, but why couldn't he understand when they were connected? Were these Taihe people crazy? Chapter 371. After the hunting team leader returned to the tribe, he was called to the chief. Every time he came back from a hunt, he would have a small meeting to report the results of his hunt. He thought it would be the same this time, so after he walked into the house, he gave a simple summary of his hunt. He also mentioned the strange reactions of the Taihe tribesmen when he came back. He was then told that the Taihe tribesmen reacted that way because they were beaten up again. Why did he say, again? It couldn't be helped. The two tribes were so close to each other. Although there weren't any major conflicts, there were always small conflicts. Most of the time, the Taihe tribesmen were weaker. After a while, they got used to it. So, in the eyes of the hunting team leader, it was normal for the Taihe tribesmen to be beaten up. Was there a need to mention it? It wasn't even a need. In this kind of environment, the weak listen to the strong. If you lost, don't talk nonsense. But this time, not only were the Taihe tribesmen beaten up, they were also robbed of something good. As for what it was, they didn't know yet. They only knew that the Taihe tribesmen spent a lot of effort to get it, but it was still robbed by the Yanjiao tribesmen. The Yanjiao tribesmen knew that if something was already in the hands of the other party, the Yanjiao tribesmen wouldn't do anything. But if the other party didn't get it, the Yanjiao tribesmen would dare to rob it. Whoever had the ability would get it. And this was because the Yanjiao tribesmen didn't do anything to the Taihe tribesmen. If this happened to other tribes, a bloody battle would be inevitable. So, when the hunting team leader heard that his tribesmen robbed the other party's goods again, he was very happy. The hunt went smoothly, and his good mood went up another level. He lay on the chair, crossed his legs, and looked at the young men standing next to him. His eyes were kind and loving. These were all excellent warriors of the Yanjiao tribe. Although they were young, they were all very talented. He heard that the one who robbed them was a young man. And he beat up Fei-Ong and the others from the Taihe tribe. Fei-Ong of the Taihe tribe was a high-level warrior. If he could rob and beat up their people, his strength should be. The head of the hunting group glanced at the few of them, then reached his hand into the animal skin bag and took out a palm-sized jade stone. The color of the jade was dense and slightly transparent. Even from a distance, one could feel a sense of calmness and gentleness. Taking out the jade, the leader of the hunting group said in a gratified tone, "Who is the one who hit and robbed the goods? Come out and let me praise you. I'm so happy today. I'll give him a piece of jade that I got by chance during this hunt." Normally, the leader would not be willing to take out the gem as a reward, but he was in a good mood today, so he took it out to liven things up. However, after he finished speaking and waited, no one stepped forward. What? No one wants to receive the reward? The leader asked in surprise. Still, no one made a sound. Crow slash. Tao Zheng. What? Everyone he looked at and asked shook their heads in denial. The three young men were still puzzled. They didn't participate in the hunt, but they were called here for questioning. But they didn't do it, so what if there was a reward? They couldn't lie to the chief and the leaders, could they? The smile on the leader's face slowly disappeared. He seemed to have realized something. He looked at the few people beside him and the chief sitting at the head of the table. He straightened his body. What's going on? Only then did he realize that the atmosphere in the room was a little strange. When he was called here, he was too excited to notice. Now that he had calmed down, he realized that everyone was serious. Including the chief and the shaman, they were all silent. Looking at their expressions, they seemed to be thinking about something important. Guang Yi, tell us, what's going on? The leader looked at the people beside him. A middle-aged man sitting next to him sighed and said, although we were very happy when we heard about this, after asking, we found that no one admitted it. You mean, that means, this might not have been done by our people. Guang Yi sighed. How is that possible? How could this not have been done by our people? The leader was confused. The others glanced at him, thinking, what does he mean by, how could it not have been done by our people? Is this all the Yanzhou people can do? But, this really needed to be investigated. Could it be that someone is pretending to be a Yanzhou person? Or are the people of Taihe lying and blaming us for this? Asked the leader of the hunting team. The chief sitting at the head of the table shook his head. From what I know, the possibility of them lying to us is not high. No matter what, we must take this seriously. An old woman with a head full of silver hair and many accessories sitting beside the chief said in a low voice. Don't tell anyone else about this for now. We'll talk about it after the investigation. The chief said. Seeing that the chief and shaman had spoken, the others nodded, yes. The meeting was adjourned. The leader saw Guang Yi leave and called out, Hey, Guang Yi, where are you going? I still have something to ask you. Go ask someone else. Guang Yi walked in front without looking back. He waved his hand impatiently and continued walking. Seeing this, the leader could only ask someone else to find out more about this incident. This was really strange. On the other side, after Guang Yi left the chief, he walked with his head down, wondering who was behind this. Was it a Yanzhou person? Or was it the Flaming Horn bloodline that had been left behind? The possibility was not high. Unknowingly, Guang Yi had left the residential area of the tribe and walked to the border. It was quiet here, suitable for thinking. When the Yanzhou guards saw Guang Yi, they greeted him and left. With Guang Yi here, they did not need to patrol this area. Plus, Guang Yi seemed eager for them to leave. Guang Yi only gave a casual to the guards and did not look at them. It was the same whether he looked at them or not. Guang Yi continued walking until he reached the river at the border. They had dug this river themselves. Although it was not big, it kept some beasts away. It was the tribe's first line of defense. Since he was here, Guang Yi did not plan to leave immediately. He sat down and stared at the sparkling river under the setting sun until he heard footsteps. Guang Yi was very strong. Even the leader of the hunting team might not be as good as him. His hearing was even better. When he heard the footsteps, he became alert. He stopped thinking and stared at the forest on the other side of the river. Rustle, 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 someone was walking around. Who would be walking around at this time of the year? Guang Yi was confused. The hunters had returned. The patrols would not be on the other side of the river at this time of the year. Then, who was it? Rustle, 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 the footsteps grew louder. Xiao Xian stepped on the wet grass. Although he thought he was mentally strong, he could not help but feel nervous. The closer he got to Yanzhou, the harder it was for him to calm down. Were the other half of the Yanzhou people the same as the Yanzhou he knew? Was his temperament as he had imagined? Would there be other drastic changes? What kind of attitude would they have towards him? After all, the two branches of the tribe had been separated for 1,000 years. As he thought, he walked out of the forest. Xiao Xian saw the person on the other side of the river. It was a middle-aged man wearing clothes made of cloth and animal skin. He had a short beard and a muscular body. His skin that was exposed outside his clothes was dark. His back was straight and he stood steadily. However, he gave off the feeling that he would attack at any moment. The man's eyes narrowed. He looked sternly and oppressively at Xiao Xian on the other side of the river. When he saw the man, Xiao Xian's first thought was, "I've found you." As for Guang Yi, he frowned when he saw the young man. He scolded him sternly, "What are you doing outside at this time of the year?" Xiao Xian. He had thought of all possible reactions when he saw a tribesman. The only reaction he did not expect was this. Seeing the confusion in Xiao Xian's eyes, Guang Yi said sternly, "What are you waiting for? Come here." Guang Yi walked back a little and kicked a tree as thick as two people into the river. Looking at the tree floating in the river and the uncle's scolding gaze, Xiao Xian thought, "Forget it, I'll go over first." He jumped up and landed on the tree. Using the buoyancy of the tree as support, Xiao Xian jumped up again and landed on the riverbank. Looking back, Xiao Xian saw the uncle dragging a piece of wood floating on the river to the shore. There was a straw rope tied to one end of the tree. After crossing the river with the help of the tree would be pulled back and placed on the bank. It would be used the next time someone crossed the river. Tossing the tree aside, Guang Yi saw Xiao Xian still standing there and was displeased. "What are you standing there for? Go back. What time is it now? Why are you still strolling outside?" Xiao Xian scratched his head. What did he mean? Was he acting friendly? Didn't seem like it. Looking at the man walking forward with his hands behind his back, Xiao Xian wanted to ask, "Uncle, did you get the wrong person? Hurry up and follow. Don't even think about sneaking out at this time." Guang Yi's face was scolding, his gaze so stern it was like he wanted to nail someone to the ground. Guang Yi's actions were like an elder who caught a junior sneaking out to play and was scolding him. Xiao Xian was even more confused. However, he had achieved his goal of entering the Yanjiao tribe. Let's go then. Thinking about it, Xiao Xian quickly caught up with the people in front of him and walked into the place he had been searching for. If there were other Yanjiao people here, they would not be like this. However, at this time, the other patrols had been chased away by Guang Yi. As for Guang Yi, if he was not a member of the tribe, he would not know this person's characteristics. Everyone in the Flaming Horn tribe knew that Guang Yi was as powerful as the current leader of the hunting team. However, even though he was much more powerful than the leader, there was only one reason why he couldn't become the leader of the hunting team. This master had face blindness. Chapter 372. Guang Yi had encountered a problem he didn't know how to solve. He couldn't think of a solution, so he wasn't in a good mood today. He didn't expect to meet a young man wandering around so late at night. Guang Yi couldn't remember people. The number of people in the tribe he could remember could be counted on two hands, and they were all old friends he had known for decades. If it was anyone else, Guang Yi wouldn't be able to recognize them. But with Guang Yi's special status and power in the tribe, this shortcoming was nothing. He himself was not interested in being the leader of the hunting team, because he thought it was too troublesome to recognize people. He wanted to remember the hundreds and thousands of people in the hunting team every time they went out. To him, this was a huge problem. Usually when people greeted him, he would respond, but he couldn't remember their faces. However, he could still tell if they were from the tribe. If they were from another tribe, Guang Yi would be able to recognize them immediately even if they weren't in disguise. This was a common aura that belonged to all tribesmen, just like how the long-clawed monkey could tell that Xiao Xian was a Yanjiao from his aura and presence. Even though Xiao Xian wasn't using his totemic power, there was a subtle connection between Yanjiao people. Anyone with a bit of sensitivity would be able to tell. Guang Yi couldn't recognize people, but he was sure they were from the tribe. When he first saw Xiao Xian, he thought this kid was disobedient. He should be scolded for wandering around outside when it was time to return to the tribe. If he still didn't repent, he would have to do it himself. You young people, seriously. Don't always think you're so strong. Do you know how many fearsome beasts there are in the forest? Do you know how many fearsome beasts even I am afraid of? Not just fearsome beasts, but other dangers as well. Can you handle them? Why is the tribe out hunting this time instead of hunting? Because it was impossible for one person to hunt alone. Do you think you're stronger than Duo Kong? Let's take a step back. Do you think you're stronger than Wu Zhan, Tao Zheng and Zhui? As he spoke, Guang Yi turned to look at Xiao Xian to see if he had any impatience, disapproval or any other expression. Xiao Xian's expression changed to one of respect and the man turned his head. He didn't know who Duo Kong was, nor did he know who Wu Zhan, Tao Zheng and Zhui were. But based on his experience, under these circumstances, the best choice was to listen obediently. However, the names that the man had just mentioned were definitely famous people in the tribe. Xiao Xian memorized them. Seeing Xiao Xian's attitude, Guang Yi's dissatisfaction, but he didn't finish scolding. You peoples as arrogant. Arrogant. Disobedient. Do you think you're? If you meet an adult mountain lion, cave bear or other large fearsome beasts, how many lives do you have? Even the smaller ones can easily keep you in the forest forever. For example, the long-clawed machete monkey that made Taiha suffer. One of them can easily kill you. Xiao Xian was originally obediently listening to the lecture, but when he suddenly heard the name long-clawed knife monkey, he thought of the one he had caught before. He opened his mouth and was about to say something when he saw the person in front of him staring at him. That expression seemed to say, "You still want to quibble?" After some thought, Xiao Xian remained silent and listened attentively. Guang Yi was satisfied and continued scolding Xiao Xian for not following the rules and acting on his own. Xiao Xian followed behind Guang Yi and walked in. The Yanjiao tribe's second line of defense was a wall made of large wooden stakes and rocks. There were people guarding the entrance. Seeing Guang Yi bring a stranger in, they were curious, but since Guang Yi didn't say anything, they didn't dare to ask. When Guang Yi brought Xiao Xian in and out of earshot, the guards began to discuss. Who was the person Guang Yi brought in? Someone asked. I don't know, but with Guang Yi here, we don't have to worry. Although Guang Yi was face-blind, he had never brought an enemy into the tribe before, so they weren't worried. While listening, Xiao Xian paid attention to the surrounding scenery and layout. He didn't expect to enter the tribe so easily and in such a way. It was really unexpected. The layout here wasn't too different from what Xiao Xian knew about the Yanjiao tribe. The central living area was on a mountain, but it was just a small mountain. There were a small number of plantation fields around, but only a small number. There were also animals in captivity around, but they were all small animals that looked docile. It seemed that the people of the Flaming Horns tribe mainly hunted. However, from the bronze weapons in their hands and the cloth clothes they wore, they must have been trading with the outside world. Seeing that they were doing well, Xiao Xian was relieved. At this time, the sun was about to set. Many people were eating dinner at home, not many were walking around outside. These people were also curious when they saw Xiao Xian's unfamiliar face. However, when they saw Guang Yi, they swallowed their curiosity and wondered if he was from a family up in the mountains. There were so many people in the tribe, they couldn't remember all of them clearly. They were only familiar with those who lived in this area. After scolding, Guang Yi remembered to ask for Xiao Xian's name. What's your name again? Xiao Xian's heart tightened and he said seriously, I'm Xiao Xian. He waited for Guang Yi's reaction. Guang Yi stopped in his tracks and tilted his head slightly as if he was recalling something. Then he said with a look of realization, Oh, it's you. Xiao Xian. Who are you thinking of now? You've got the wrong person, you know. Actually Xiao Xian was interrupted before he could finish. Alright, go back. Don't think about running away again. I'm watching. Guang Yi said impatiently. He looked at Xiao Xian as if to say, stop talking nonsense. You're such a busybody. Xiao Xian didn't know what expression to use. He felt like the misunderstanding was getting worse. However, a misunderstanding was a misunderstanding. Xiao Xian wanted to see what would happen if this misunderstanding continued. Xiao Xian didn't know who this person thought he was, but he heard people calling him Guang Yi on the way here. Judging by their attitude, this person must have a high position in the tribe. Guang Yi brought Xiao Xian to a wooden house. Although he couldn't remember faces, he remembered clearly whose house it was. Go in. Don't think about running away, Guang Yi gestured with his chin. The door to the house was open. Xiao Xian walked to the door and scratched his head, wondering if he should greet the owner. Creak, a window opened on the other side of the house. The person inside saw Guang Yi but couldn't see Xiao Xian because of the angle. Guang Yi also saw the person by the window. He pointed at him and recalled something. I'm Zhao Ming. Uncle Guang Yi, why are you here? The person inside asked excitedly. Everyone knew Guang Yi and many young warriors admired him. The person inside wanted to jump out of the window but remembered that he was covered in mud. He would definitely be scolded if he went out, so he held himself back. Oh, right, Zhao Ming. So, Zhao Ming, I brought your brother here. Keep an eye on him, don't let him run around. Guang Yi walked up the mountain after saying that. Zhao Ming was confused by Guang Yi's words. His brother had just finished participating in the group hunt. His results were not bad and he even made a small contribution. He should be celebrating with a few friends tonight. Why was he running around again? Zhao Ming put down the things in his hands and left the small room. He wanted to ask his brother, who was brought back by Guang Yi. Brother, didn't you go to celebrate? However, when Zhao Ming walked out of the room and saw a stranger at the door, his words were stuck in his throat. Who are you? Zhao Ming asked cautiously, his hands reaching behind his back. Me? Of course I'm Yanjiao. Chapter 373. What kind of answer was that? Zhao Ming was still looking at Xiao Xian cautiously. It was undeniable that he relaxed a little after knowing he was from his own tribe. However, he did not believe him completely. He might not be outstanding in other aspects, but his memory was very good. Just like the other children in the tribe who had not awakened, he liked to stare at the people who went out to hunt every time the tribe went out to hunt. Then he would talk with the other children about the famous people on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. Even if they were not famous, he could still remember their names. However, Zhao Ming had no recollection of the person in front of him. Although he believed that Guang Yi would not bring in anyone who was a threat to the tribe, Zhao Ming trusted his own memory even more. I've never seen you before. Zhao Ming's hand was still behind his back. There was a dagger in a leather sheath on his belt. Xiao Xian did not mind. He noticed that there was only one child in the house. He was not in a hurry to clarify and decided to play with the child. The children here were more alert than the children in the other Yanjiao tribe. Perhaps it was because the environment was more complicated. After all, the Yanjiao people had lived in isolation for almost 1,000 years. Their thinking was much simpler. Pulling a wooden stool over, Xiao Xian sat down and looked around the house. This was the area at the foot of the mountain. This should be a normal family in the tribe. Looking at the daily necessities, there should not be many people living here. Perhaps there were only 2 brothers. Although the things in the house were simple, compared to the Yanjiao tribe Xiao Xian had lived in, the people here had come into contact with many different things. There were cloth bags hanging on the wall and some composite or metal tools. There were fewer pure stone tools. There were pottery bowls and pots on the table. There was also a large pottery water tank in the corner of the floor. It was all made of painted pottery. Seeing Xiao Xian looking around, Zhao Ming took half a step forward and took a deep breath as if to encourage himself. His voice grew louder. Who are you? I'm Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian. Never heard of you. Are you really from Yanjiao? Zhao Ming hadn't awakened yet, so his abilities were limited. His senses were not as strong as Guang Yi and the others, so he couldn't tell if Xiao Xian was Yanjiao or not without his totemic power. He couldn't even tell if Xiao Xian was Yanjiao. The answer to the illumination was the totem patterns that appeared on Xiao Xian's face. Because he was wearing cloth clothes and animal skins, the totem patterns on his arms and other parts of his body were not obvious. It was already late and the light was not good. The illumination could only illuminate the patterns on Xiao Xian's face. The totem pattern was a very powerful proof. It was more useful than 1,000 words. Seeing the totem patterns on Xiao Xian's face, Zhao Ming finally let out a long sigh of relief. His speech was also much easier. Where do you live? I've never seen you before. Also, why did Guang Yi bring you to my house? Zhao Ming pulled over a square stool and sat down. He asked Xiao Xian. I was wandering outside when Guang Yi caught me. He asked me who I was and I told him I was Xiao Xian. Then he brought me here. Xiao Xian shrugged helplessly. Does your brother look like me? Zhao Ming shook his head. No, not at all. But Uncle Guang Yi can't recognize people and he gets names wrong. My brother's name is Zhao Quan, not Xiao Xian. So he was face blind. Xiao Xian understood. He had guessed this before, but he never met someone like this. He didn't expect the first Yanjiao he met here to be face blind. He even got names wrong. Aren't you going back? Zhao Ming asked. I can't. I'm going to stay at your house for the night. Xiao Xian said. Zhao Ming didn't understand why Xiao Xian said, you can't go back. He wanted to ask more but his stomach growled. Everything had to wait until he was full. Zhao Ming put his questions aside for now. They were all tribesmen and there were no grudges between them. It was fine to stay for the night. Just like how his brother was sleeping at a friend's house. You can stay. My brother isn't coming back tonight, so you can sleep at his place. Oh right, have you eaten? No, I didn't get to eat before Guang Yi brought me back. He even scolded me the whole way. Xiao Xian said. Zhao Ming gave Guang Yi a sympathetic look. Guang Yi was famous for teaching people a lesson, and he always had a serious look on his face. Many people in the tribe respected him, even the young warriors in the tribe. Then I'll share some with you. Zhao Ming brought over a clay pot. There was some cooked meat soup inside. It was still warm. His brother had asked someone to bring a pot of meat soup back so he wouldn't starve. If he couldn't finish it tonight, he could eat more tomorrow. It wouldn't spoil after one night. However, it wasn't enough with Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was a totemic warrior and ate a lot. Should I cook some more? Zhao Ming put down the pot and wanted to get some food but was stopped by Xiao Xian. I brought some food. Let me borrow your pot and water. Xiao Xian waved a pouch made of animal skin. When they were in the forest, most of the time, they would just roast the meat and eat it. There were a few times when the meat was still raw. However, they had no choice. It was too dangerous in the forest and they had to be on guard at all times. It wasn't easy to find a cave and it wasn't easy to enjoy a cooked meal. The meat they brought was not fully cooked either. When it was good, there would only be a little bit of blood. When it was bad, there would be blood. Cooking soup was out of the question. Since they were here, Xiao Xian planned to drink some meat soup. What kind of meat are you cooking? Zhao Ming sniffed and asked. I don't know what it's called. It looks weird. Want some? No, we can't eat what you totemic warriors eat. Although he was greedy, he knew his limits. You can have some soup. Xiao Xian scooped half a spoonful of soup and poured it into Zhao Ming's bowl. The meat soup he cooked wasn't that strong. Children could drink it after diluting it. Xiao Xian had seen it in the tribe before. Moreover, Xiao Xian noticed that the children here were stronger. Hey, my brother is always like this too. Zhao Ming grinned from ear to ear. His impression of Xiao Xian was even better now. He wasn't sure if it was an illusion, but Zhao Ming felt that this soup was better than the ones he drank before. After drinking it, there was a clear flow of warmth in his body. After a whole afternoon of making pottery, his tired body felt much better. After eating and drinking, the sky outside was dark and the 2 moons dimmed. After putting out the firewood, everyone went to sleep. For the first time in half a year, Xiao Xian could sleep peacefully. He didn't have to worry about the desert beasts, the slave masters, or the hidden threats in the forest. He was surrounded by Yanjiao people. Although there was no fire seed, Xiao Xian felt like it was right beside him. His heart was peaceful. He slept all the way to the next day without any dreams. Xiao Xian woke up early in the morning. Hearing the voices and movements of the people outside, he was a little dazed. After a while, he remembered that he was in the Yanjiao tribe. It wasn't the one he was familiar with, but the one he had been looking for. Opening the window in his room, Xiao Xian smelled the fresh morning air and looked outside. The mountain wasn't high, but it covered a large area. Every house was 10 meters apart, and some were even further apart. Anyway, it was a big place. Zhao Ming was woken up by the smell of food. He yawned as he walked out. The meat soup was ready. Xiao Xian finished his portion and Zhao Ming cooked his as well. He even added some fearsome beast meat to the soup. "Where do you plan to go later?" asked Xiao Xian. "To get the pots," said Zhao Ming. He made a few big pots yesterday. There were people in charge of making them in the tribe. He just needed to get them today. "I'll go with you." "Okay." Zhao Ming forgot about the questions he wanted to ask yesterday. He was busy drinking the soup. After licking the last bit of meat off and putting away the things, Zhao Ming brought Xiao Xian to the place where the pots were. No one was allowed to enter the place where the pots were made, especially curious children. It was easy to get into trouble. So after the pots were made, the person in charge would place the pots on the ground outside for each family to take their things. Seeing Xiao Xian's unfamiliar face, many people were curious. They asked Zhao Ming a few questions, but when they heard that Guang Yi brought him here, they stopped asking. Zhao Ming made 2 big pots and 5 pots yesterday. When he found his things, he found a broken piece of pottery on the ground. There were words written on it. 2 out of 5 pots failed. Thank goodness the pots didn't break. Not every pottery would be successfully fired. There might be some mistakes in the pottery making process, which would affect the result of the firing. Zhao Ming was not satisfied with the result. Xiao Xian's eyes swept across the potteries of various sizes on the floor. They were categorized according to the families. Those that were used for illumination were placed together. If they failed, the person who made them would write on the broken pieces. There was no need to worry about taking them by mistake. Every pot had pictures or words written on it. Some had their own names, while others had other symbols. For example, Zhao Ming's pot had the word Zhao written on it. No matter whose pot it was, the pictures and words all had one thing in common: totems. The bottom of the pot or other parts of the pot would have a 2-horned flame totem and the word Yanjiao written on it. The words on the pots were not the ones used by the slave masters. They were the ones Xiao Xian had been exposed to since he was young. It seemed like the people of the Flaming Horn tribe had never forgotten this language, nor had they put it down. Zhao Ming wanted to take them a few times, but with Xiao Xian's help, he could do it in one go. He put the small pots into the pot. Xiao Xian carried one on each shoulder. Ah, there was a roar. Xiao Xian looked in the direction of the sound. Hearing the roar, Zhao Ming's eyes lit up. He said to Xiao Xian, "Let's go take a look." The hunting team brought back a lot of giant beasts. My brother's giant beast is over there. The spoils of their hunt were also divided according to the number of people. Who got the prey was up to them. Therefore, according to the rules, the giant beast over there also had a share of Ming Ming's family. When the time came to slaughter it, they would be able to get a lot of meat. Children who had never participated in a hunt were always curious about the giant beasts. Zhao Ming was no longer in a hurry to go home. He pulled Xiao Xian over to show off. After all, this was his brother's work. It's a dinosaur. Zhao Ming was very excited. It was rare to get such a giant beast. Xiao Xian looked over. A giant beast was tied up by thick vines. It was lying on the ground. There was a circle of thick wooden stakes around it. However, these wooden stakes were mainly used to stop people. It was very difficult to use them to trap a giant beast in the forest. This was also why the giant beast was still tied up. The children around them climbed onto the wooden stakes and looked at the giant beast. They excitedly discussed how much meat they would get and which part of it they would get. Based on the shape of the dinosaur's head, it looked like a ferocious crocodile or lizard. Especially when the dinosaur deliberately stretched its skin, the cracks on its face made it look like a savage predator with a cold gaze. However, it was different below the head. There were no thick scales. There was only a thin layer of fur. The dinosaur's head was big and looked heavy. When it came to competition, it would use its head to fight. Its tail was short and heavy. When it stood, it could maintain its heavy body's balance. When the dinosaur roared, the teeth in its mouth showed that it was a herbivorous giant beast. Two young warriors were telling the curious children about the temperament and habits of this giant beast. Zhao Ming gestured to Xiao Xian to place the vat on the ground and climb onto the wooden stakes to have a good look. They could only see through the gaps in the stakes. It was too much of an eyesore. Xiao Xian thought about it. Anyway, there was no need to worry about the vat being taken. After Zhao Ming climbed up, he ran to the side and listened to the two warriors' description of the hunt with the other children. Xiao Xian looked at the giant beast that had changed its position on the ground. This giant beast was 4 to 5 meters tall even when it was lying down. There was enough meat for everyone to share. As he thought about it, Xiao Xian noticed that there was something wrong with the vines around the giant beast. He was a frequent user of vines. Naturally, he could tell that one of the loops where the vines were tied was broken. It was slightly loose. "Hey, you two over there. The dinosaur is about to bite off the vines," Xiao Xian shouted. The two young warriors who were talking excitedly were displeased with the sudden interruption. But when they heard Xiao Xian's voice, they quickly looked over and noticed the anomaly. "Get down." One of them waved at the children on the stakes and blew the wooden whistle. They were used to situations like this, so they did not panic. They knew that if what the man said was true, the two of them would not be able to handle it. The dinosaur knew that it had been discovered. It opened its mouth wide and bit down on the vines. Its body suddenly stretched and its powerful jaws moved. Bang! Xiao Xian heard a cracking sound, followed by a high-pitched roar of a beast. Zhao Ming and the other children quickly slid down the stakes and left without looking back. This was the battlefield of the warriors. They would only be a hindrance if they stayed. Zhao Ming ran a few steps and realized that he had forgotten something. He turned around and did not see Xiao Xian. Instead, he saw two large vats beside the stakes. Just as he was thinking about whether he should go back and look for it, Zhao Ming suddenly heard a thunderous boom. The ground shook because of it. The roar was gone. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Zhao Ming did not hear any movement from the warriors guarding the vines. He swallowed his saliva and bravely moved forward. Through the gaps between the stakes, he saw the giant dinosaur kneeling on the ground. Its head was already smashed into the ground. Its hind legs were kicking as if it was trying to pull its head out. But it seemed to be powerless. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.